What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as an UCHIHA and Jinchuriki of TOBIRAMA? Part 2. If you enjoy this type of content, please violently chidori the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the UCHIHA Jinchuriki of TOBIRAMA saga. TOBIRAMA had the same opinion as Kazuki about the exam, squinting his eyes and showing a serious expression, and said to himself, "What's with the monkey? Making ninja school students answer such deep questions? Even my older brother might have a hard time answering." While TOBIRAMA was still questioning the difficulty of this set of test papers. While TOBIRAMA was doubtful about the difficulty of the test, Kazuki began to respond quickly. TOBIRAMA sneered at this scene. If the Uchiha clan truly understood the will of fire, then they wouldn't be Uchiha. Although Kazuki might resemble him a bit, that was only in superficial terms, such as the use of water release or kenjutsu. Although Kazuki was showing a bit of the flavor of the will of fire in his performance, TOBIRAMA did not believe that an Uchiha, known for his practical talent and weakness in theory, could handle questions of this level. But as Kazuki answered, Senju TOBIRAMA's smile gradually subsided. His expression changed from mocking to serious, and he looked at the answers on the test paper very seriously. "No, you really answered fluently, right? Are you a Hokage or am I a Hokage? Oh, Kazuki is the descendant of Kagami. Then it's okay, you are worthy of being the descendant of my apprentice. Good. Where the leaves of Konoha flutter, the fire will also continue. Where there are leaves fluttering, the flames of hope will burn. The light of the fire will illuminate the village, and new leaves will grow." Kazuki used the heartfelt words of Sarutobi Hiruzen before his death as a summary of the last big question, which made Senju TOBIRAMA's eyes light up and hesitate. This emotion is too abundant. Is Kazuki kid serious? Is he really a genius born to study the will of fire? Fallen leaves are not objects without feelings. They are transformed into nutrients to feed the flowers. Kazuki checked the test paper and said to TOBIRAMA with emotion, "It's autumn. Fallen leaves become nutrients to feed next year's spring shoots. The will of fire really does encapsulate the rules of the world. It's fascinating." TOBIRAMA pondered Kazuki's words, and the more he thought about them, the more profound they seemed. He wanted to argue and suppress Kazuki, but he was speechless now. Especially when TOBIRAMA saw Kazuki's answer to the proposition of discipline, his expression became more complicated. Discipline is crucial for shinobi. Shinobi must suppress unnecessary emotions. The village sets strict and effective rules that must be obeyed from top to bottom to avoid most unnecessary conflicts. These words are almost the same as the answer he gave when he discussed how to achieve peace with Hashirama when he was a child. Except for Senju Hashirama and his brothers who were present at the time, Senju TOBIRAMA never talked about this conversation with anyone else, even his apprentices. But today, 30 years after his death, Senju TOBIRAMA saw a kid from the Uchiha clan, saying words that were almost the same as when he was a child. This peculiar feeling enveloped Senju TOBIRAMA's heart, and he thought of the similarities between Kazuki and him, such as the use of water release and kenjutsu, even in aspects of his personality. This feeling is something that no other disciple had given TOBIRAMA before. From the target Senju TOBIRAMA, you get a special talent, the power of Senju TOBIRAMA. The power of Senju TOBIRAMA. You can borrow the power of Senju TOBIRAMA's soul in your body, and the strength depends on the subjective will of the target. Kazuki looked at this strange talent and blinked. TOBIRAMA faked a look of difficulty and coughed dramatically. "Kid, you've answered quite well. But there is still a big gap compared to me. How about this? You kid think of a way to let me answer a set, and I will show you the perfect answer sheet, which can also be regarded as teaching you. Hey, isn't this the second Hokage? I haven't seen you for a few days. Why do you still want to answer children's questions?" Kazuki looked at TOBIRAMA with a smile and shook his head again. "Forget it, TOBIRAMA. Don't you think it would be a little embarrassing if your score didn't beat mine? Wouldn't that make you look pretty bad? And if that happens, wouldn't you blame your dear disciple? If I allow you to continue with your whims, Wouldn't that be like trying to create discord? You've been dead for so many years. The ninja academy you founded didn't have written exams, and you probably haven't even developed an evaluation model. Better forget it. It really isn't worth it. If you don't like it, just criticize me. Kazuki, in a very objective and considerate tone, mentioned the difference between the Sengoku period and the current era of the ninja village, giving Tobirama a way out of the predicament. But his tone was very infuriating, and Tobirama's temples throbbed when he heard it. He temporarily forgot the wonderful feeling he had just had with Kazuki and gritted his teeth in anger. Don't look down on me, I'm the second Hokage. If I can't even beat you, an Uchiha kid, in the exam of the Will of Fire, it would be a joke. A model has never been the key to the Will of Fire. What is important is the core and the logic. Don't talk nonsense. Can you make me answer the questions? If you can't, just say so. Kazuki shook his head with amusement and did not judge Tobirama's provocation and his desire for his apprentice to mark his papers. He said like an adult comforting a child. Okay, I really can't do anything about you, I'll just agree to it. What's the strange tone of your voice? Do you think I'm being unreasonable? Kazuki shrugged. I didn't say that. You're so old, but you're so sensitive. Really? Tobirama's face darkened. Evil Kazuki kid. Kazuki slowly looked around the students in the examination room. Many very young students were sleeping soundly. There was no way. This test paper, which was written by Sarutobi Hiruzen and wanted to test Kazuki's level, was too difficult for them. Instead of filling out a test with such sensitive questions with wrong answers, it was better to hand in a blank sheet, which was safer. From a certain point of view, this is the wisdom of a mediocre student. Kazuki thought when he saw Uchiha Obito writing furiously. With Uchiha Obito's brain after being taken away by Uchiha Setsuna, what kind of earth-shattering answer would he write? Even Kazuki was very interested in seeing the reaction of the teacher who graded the papers. That would definitely be interesting. Kazuki stood up and, passing by a sleeping student, leaned over and patted him on the shoulder. Classmate, did you drop this pen? The confused classmate woke up. Teacher, I really don't know. It's not that I don't want to answer. The whole examination room laughed, but the laughter was full of resentment. Which teacher asked this question? It was too difficult. Isn't it embarrassing? Even Ikaku, who was sitting on the podium, laughed helplessly, thinking to himself, children, the teacher doesn't blame you. This is the third Hokage to test Kazuki-kun. For the future of the village, please bear with it for now. I will give you a few more classes to make up for it. Kazuki-kun, this is not my pen, thank you. The classmate saw Kazuki's kind smile, scratched his head awkwardly, with a look of respect on his face. Inada-kun, try to answer. You can do it. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. This is a precious opportunity to learn the Will of Fire. This set of test questions is very good. It would be a pity to miss it. Kazuki took out a pen with the Uchiha clan emblem, which was obviously expensive, and handed it to him with an encouraging smile. Inada took the pen tremblingly. He didn't expect that Kazuki could remember his name. The moment their gazes met, the Sharingan in Kazuki's eyes slowly rotated. Kazuki-kun, please rest assured I will work hard. Okay. Kazuki nodded to him, walked to the front of the stage and handed the test paper to Ikaku. Umino-sensei, I'll hand in the paper first. Ikaku accepted Kazuki's exam with satisfaction, and saw that many students who had given up on answering the questions were hesitantly picking up their pens. A sense of pride that came from the bottom of his heart arose within him. In the classroom, the looks towards Kazuki's figure were complex. Uchiha Obito pursed his lips, thinking about Uchiha, the idea of family supremacy that was instilled in him by Setsuna. He snorted coldly, combined what he thought was the Will of Fire with Uchiha, and wrote on the test paper more quickly. Sarutobi Asuma had a complicated expression. If he was not in the classroom, he would have wanted to take out the stolen cigarette from his trouser pocket and light one. Noera Rin chuckled, thinking about visiting Kazuki's house on the weekend, and hummed a nice song in a low voice. Might Guy burst into tears and said with deep emotion, "This is youth." Until Ikaku signaled him to be quiet, Might Guy turned his attention to the test paper, and quickly wrote something like youth on all the questions. From the target Might Guy, you get the Taijutsu Leaf Great Whirlwind. You are really emotional, Guy. Kazuki listened to the electronic sound with resignation and sat on a chair outside the classroom, waiting for Shursui to finish his exam. Come on, respected second Hokage Senju Tobirama. Tell me what you want to answer. I have controlled a Nadakuin with Genjutsu, and he will write your answer on the test paper. Write well, don't let him fail the exam. Tobirama snorted coldly, but did not argue with Kazuki, but closed his eyes and thought. After a long time, he slowly said the answer to the first question, looking very serious. No one expected that in an ordinary final exam, one of the papers was answered by the late second Hokage. During the night. Hokage residence. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at the exam papers on his desk with a mix of anticipation and curiosity, lit his pipe and began to smoke, enjoying the aroma of tobacco. Let's see how the young people of the village have done in the exam. Hiruzen neatly opened the sealed test paper bag. He started reading from the first paper, smoking and carefully correcting the students with a red pen. As the third Hokage and the honorary headmaster of the ninja school, Hiruzen did not usually get involved in the school's affairs except for the opening and graduation ceremonies. Therefore, this time he was not only evaluating Kazuki, but also testing the will of fire in all the students in the school. Noera Rin. This was the first exam that Hiruzen reviewed. Not bad. Although the idea is still a little naive, the main idea is still closely tied to the will of fire. This is a child from a commoner family. It is rare for him to have such insights. Wow. She also mentions Kazuki, interesting. In the last question, describe your understanding of the will of fire. Rin used as an example Kazuki's willingness to share the mystical palm technique with her, considering it a true manifestation of the will of fire. Hiruzen nodded slightly, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Furthermore, Hiruzen immediately caught a hint of emotion in Rin's words. Ah, youth. This is where bonds are born. Very good, very good. Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded with satisfaction and gave Noera Rin a high score of 87. This good start made the third Hokage very happy, and he was looking forward to the performance of other students. Might Guy. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at the test paper with a smile. His expression gradually changed, and he sighed helplessly. The whole test paper was full of youth, youth, and youth. Discipline is youth. The will of fire is youth. The shinobi clan and civilian shinobi are all youth. Even as the third Hokage, Might Guy also listed various examples in detail to prove that he is a youthful Hokage. After thinking for a while, Sarutobi Hiruzen still laughed. Youth? Funny little guy, I'm really not old yet. Although this child's theoretical knowledge is a little lacking, his enthusiasm and love for Konoha can be seen by me through the test paper. Good boy, keep going. Sarutobi Hiruzen gave Might Guy 83 points and wrote a comment for him. Look forward to the day when your youth blooms. In Might Guy's exam, it was also mentioned how Kazuki had healed him from an injury. He believed that Kazuki was a model of the combination of youth and the will of fire and was his goal to learn and pursue. So far, the two test papers that Sarutobi Hiruzen was very satisfied with both had Kazuki's name. This made him look forward to Kazuki's answer even more. Uchiha Bito. Sarutobi Hiruzen's expression became serious. Anbu had once reported to him about this Uchiha genius who opened 2 tomo at the age of 7. Later, another Anbu report suggested that Obito may have had contact with Uchiha Setsuna, an elder of the Uchiha clan belonging to the Hawk faction, who had attempted to start an armed rebellion in the past. A genius of the Uchiha clan, a member of the Hawk faction. Sarutobi Hiruzen took a deep puff of cigarette. The combination of these two words would make him feel very troublesome even if he was the Hokage of Konoha. This was one of the most difficult problems in Konoha at present. After seeing Uchiha Obito's answer, Sarutobi Hiruzen frowned, and in the end it was like a knot. In Uchiha Obito's entire answer, the content about the Uchiha clan occupied the majority. With strength as the core argument, he expounded the superiority of the Uchiha clan's dominant position in Konoha after the dissolution of the Senju clan, and explained everything that Uchiha Setsuna had recently instilled in him. At the end, he reluctantly combined the will of fire with the Uchiha clan and talked nonsense, but Sarutobi Hiruzen no longer had the patience to read on. Shinosuke, focus on this Uchiha Obito, and let the Anbu shift the focus of the Uchiha clan surveillance to him and Uchiha Setsuna as appropriate. Sitting across from him, helping out in the office, Sarutobi Shinosuke nodded. I know, father. As the eldest son of the third Hokage, his current position is the captain of the Anbu, and he is in charge of all Anbu affairs. Sarutobi Shinosuke watched his father's expression change from pleasant to extremely ugly. and curiously took Uchiha Obito's test paper. After a moment, his eyes narrowed. This kid is a big problem. According to my information, the Uchiha Hawks have had contact with him. It seems that he has been deeply affected. Do we need to do further processing, Father? Sarutobi Hiruzen waved his hand. Words can reveal people's hearts. Just strengthen the monitoring. After calming down, Hiruzen silently searched for Kazuki's test paper. Initially, he had planned to review all the students' exams first. In this way, he could fulfill his duty as Hokage fairly, but Obito's exam had given him a bit of a jolt, and Hiruzen no longer had the patience to wait. If Kazuki is also similar to Obito, impossible, Kazuki won't be like this. He is the descendant of Kagami and is so kind. Sarutobi Hiruzen muttered to himself, found Kazuki's test paper quickly, and read it very seriously. Shinosuke pricked up his ears. Not only his father, the Hokage, but also his brother, Asuma Sarutobi, have mentioned this name unintentionally recently. A kid from the Uchiha clan can actually have such an influence in the Sarutobi clan. And seeing his father's expression change, Sarutobi Shinosuke was even more curious from the bottom of his heart. Where the leaves of Konoha are flying, the fire will also continue, and new leaves will be born. Fallen flowers are not things without feelings. They become nutrients for flowers in spring. Sarutobi Hiruzen repeated these two sentences in a low voice. His eyes lit up, and he gently patted the table. Those words resonated deeply in his heart. Especially the first sentence, which seemed to evoke in Hiruzen's mind the image of a Hokage who would, without hesitation, sacrifice his life to protect the future of the village. Teacher, I miss you. Sarutobi Hiruzen stared at the photo frame of Senju Tobirama not far away and whispered, Please rest assured, for the village, I will not hesitate to sacrifice myself. He once again recalled the scene of Senju Tobirama covering the 6 of them, which was a regret he would never forget in his life. Sarutobi Shinosuke looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen, who was lost in his memories, in shock. Father, father. After Shinosuke called several times in a low voice, Hiruzen woke up from his memories. He slowly looked away from the second Hokage's portrait, cast a disapproving glance at his impatient eldest son, and then carefully handed him Kazuki's test paper. You, as an ANBU captain, review this. Would you be able to write an expression of the will of fire with this depth? Shinosuke took Kazuki's test paper, at first with indifference, but one glance was enough for his pupils to dilate, and he began to read carefully. Kazuki's response combined Hiruzen's sincere thoughts on his deathbed with the words the second Hokage had spoken in his youth. Kazuki. There is no doubt about it. He is Uncle Kagami's worthy descendant. Father, I think we should spread this test widely. We could extract some of his quotes and use them to promote the will of fire among the shinobi in the village. This would help strengthen their understanding of it. Generally speaking, each village has different spiritual pillars, such as our will of fire and the will of stone in Iwagakure. A catchy and concise summary is very helpful for spreading the will of fire. As an ANBU captain, Shinosuke had quickly grasped this point. Go ahead, Shinosuke. This is a very meaningful thing. Hiruzen nodded in agreement, took back Kazuki's test paper, and wrote a full score on it without hesitation, and then hesitated again. He wanted to write a suitable comment for Kazuki. After a moment he wrote, I am glad to see the will of fire shining so brightly in your hands, Kazuki. May the love for Konoha take root in your heart and bloom into splendid flowers. However, Hiruzen was still not completely satisfied. He shook his head in disapproval. I will talk to Kazuki in person in a few days. This is a good child. Now the hawks of the Uchiha clan are rising strongly. Uchiha Obito has been polluted by them. Kazuki, as the descendant of Kagami and the excellent inheritor of the will of fire, must be protected with all efforts. I have a hunch that Kazuki may be the key to solving the problems of the Uchiha clan in the future. Shinosuke nodded silently, indicating that he understood. Although words can deceive, being able to express the will of fire with such depth, as if they came from the words of the Hokage himself, made the possibility of deception almost non-existent. It's better that I continue reviewing the others' exams. I must not be partial to Kazuki, I must be fair. Hiruzen smiled as he read through the papers, giving low or high scores, but no one failed, but he didn't give any additional comments. Until there were only 2 papers left. It was a long night, but also very satisfying to see the growth of these children. Hiruzen rubbed his tired back and took another test. Koshiro Inada. Seems to be a boy from a civilian family. Immediately, Hiruzen's expression turned strange. Sarutobi Shinosuke looked at his father in surprise. This was the first time that Sarutobi Hiruzen's expression changed so much after Obito and Kazuki's papers. Sarutobi Hiruzen narrowed his eyes, and his expression became more and more strange. A little recognition, dissatisfaction, and even a little anger. Sarutobi Shinosuke became more and more curious. Even Uchiha Obito's test paper only made his father serious. Who the hell was this Inada Kojiro to provoke such a reaction from the Hokage? I can still understand it a little bit, but he is disrespectful and arrogant. A little kid actually taught me how to be a Hokage, questioned the current village policy, and ordered me to make changes. Who taught this child? Sarutobi Hiruzen suppressed his anger and picked up the actual combat report card sent by the ninja school discipline department. If Inada Kojiro was a genius, then perhaps he could be given some tolerance. But after seeing Inada Kojiro's very poor actual combat results, Sarutobi Hiruzen exhaled a heavy breath. A waste who only knows how to talk on paper. At a young age, he did not seriously learn basic knowledge and basic ninjutsu, but he had to comment on the village's political affairs in a condescending tone, and even hinted at how he could be a truly good Hokage. If the second Hokage had told him this in person, Sarutobi Hiruzen would have humbly said that he still had a lot of shortcomings, thanked his old mentor for his advice, and said he would work harder. Whatever he said would be correct. But the second Hokage had never experienced a written exam, so he didn't understand how to go from being the leader of the village to a mere examinee. Although he had moderated his words, the condescending tone and suggestions in his writing had already made Hiruzen boil with anger. Criticism, depending on who says it, can have diametrically opposite effects. Unacceptable, complete nonsense. Sarutobi Hiruzen slapped the table, picked up a red pen, and wrote a severe comment on Inada Kojiro's test paper. Arrogant and impatient. The will of fire is not a concept you can understand from theory. What you need to learn first is how to be a ninja. And he gave him a well-deserved 0. Sarutobi Shinosuke shrugged after reading Inada's test paper. One could only say that this boy was unlucky. If it was an ordinary teacher marking the papers, he would have been scolded in the end, but it turned out that the Hokage himself had to mark the papers, so there was nothing he could do. The final test, coupled with Kojiro's critical approach, ended up infuriating the calm Sarutobi Hiruzen. The author, Sarutobi Asuma. In the test of the young rebel Asuma, this famous son of a Hokage did not hold back and lashed out, openly criticizing the hypocrisy of the will of fire and his father. He claimed that the current third Hokage did not understand the will of fire at all and was only using empty words to deceive people. In Konoha, there is no other person who is so straightforward and sharp in his words. Even Shimura Danzo did not dare to criticize him like this. Okay, good boy, you treat the test paper I made like this, right? Sarutobi Hiruzen suddenly opened the drawer of his desk and looked for something inside. Sarutobi Shinosuke looked at his father blankly as he picked up the belt, rushed out of the Hokage residence in a hurry, came to the table and glanced at the test paper, and covered his face. It's unfortunate for the family. But soon, Sarutobi Shinosuke laughed again. Boy, you like to steal my cigarettes, right? Sarutobi Shinosuke leisurely picked up the pipe his father left on the table and smoked it happily. Kazuki and Shursui guided a curious Rin as they walked through the Uchiha clan's territory. As a determined to become an excellent medical nin, Noera Rin cannot resist the temptation to learn the mystical palm technique. At the same time, Noera Rin also has the desire to become friends with Kazuki. As expected of the Uchiha clan. Rin looked in awe at the buildings of the Uchiha clan, which reflected the tradition and power of a noble family. She felt like a tourist exploring an exotic place. Every corner was fascinating and new to her. However, this territory, which seemed like a tourist site due to its ancient and picturesque style, was a place that was rarely visited by other Konoha residents. This has a lot to do with the Uchiha clan being in charge of the Konoha police force and its current reputation in Konoha. Despite being one of the founding clans of the village, to this day, many Konoha shinobi harbored an inexplicable fear of the Uchiha and did not fully understand them. In a sense, the Uchiha clan's position in Konoha was not so different from Danzo's. Both had high status, but their names were not associated with kindness or leadership, but rather with authority and darkness. If you like, you can come whenever you want. Normally, it's just Shursui and I at home, Kazuki said, ruffling Shursui's hair with a wistful smile. Although my house is quite big, it still seems very empty if there are only 2 people. Don't you think so, Shursui? That's not true. Shursui protested, puffing out his cheeks. I love being alone with you, we don't need anyone else. Ouch, brother, you hit me. You have to learn to make friends, Shursui. Brother can't accompany you forever. Kazuki said with a smile. Noera Rin covered her mouth and chuckled. As the only daughter in the family, she found the interaction between Kazuki and Shursui very interesting. You brothers have a really good relationship. Shursui just snorted, not convinced by Kazuki's words. The 3 of them continued to discuss animatedly as they walked. From a distance, anyone could have mistaken them for a happy family. However, at that very moment, 3 pairs of eyes from different directions were watching Kazuki and his companions. On one side, there were Uchiha Yashiro, Uchiha Inoka, and Uchiha Tetsuka. The 3 of them were responsible for protecting the clan's territory. Seeing Rin, a foreigner, they carefully assessed her. Brother Yashiro, that troublesome brat has brought an outsider over. Let's use this as an excuse to teach him a lesson. It can be considered as a way to vent your anger, said Uchiha Tetsuka, one of the most radical members of the clan. After receiving a lesson from Kazuki, Yashiro had returned to report his mission, suppressed his embarrassment and vaguely said that he defeated Kazuki, but still suffered a small loss. In short, the mission was completed satisfactorily. Among his friends, he could not help but express his admiration for Kazuki, leading Inoka and Tetsuka to mistakenly believe that Kazuki had caused him great difficulties, although he would not admit it due to pride. Since Kazuki became famous in the Uchiha clan for his mastery of water release, the more radical members of the clan began to view him with disdain, especially Uchiha Setsuna, who led the criticism. Tetsuka and Inoka exchanged knowing glances and smirked at each other, ready to act. But Yashiro, seeing the expression on their faces, changed his expression and quickly held their shoulders firmly. Tetsuka, Inoka, can I trust you? Yashiro said in a very serious voice. What are you saying, Yashiro? My and Inoka's parents died when we were children, and you helped us get by. To us, you're like an older brother. Tetsuka replied, puzzled by Yashiro's attitude. Inoka nodded. That's it, brother Yashiro. Well then listen to this. You must not make Kazuki feel that the Uchiha clan is hostile towards him. Yashiro said, squeezing their shoulders even tighter. I will explain everything to you at my house tonight, but for now just remember one thing. If Kazuki ever feels discontent towards the clan, both you and I will be considered unforgivable traitors. At the end, Uchiha Yashiro's eyes even showed a trace of murderous intent. Tetsuka and Inoka were both shocked, but looking at the tomo spinning in Yashiro's eyes, they swallowed their saliva and nodded hurriedly. On the other hand, Uchiha Obito, who was training with Uchiha Setsuna, watched Rin's silhouette in the distance with his face covered in sweat. Rin. Obito whispered, staring intently at her back, hoping in vain for her to turn around. However, Rin continued walking happily alongside Kazuki and Shursui, not even noticing Obito's presence. Uchiha Setsuna, seeing the scene, smiled and began to speak, as if he was thinking out loud, although his words seemed to be directed at Obito. The shinobi world is such a world. Shinobi without strength can only watch what they want being taken away. The position of Hokage is like this. The woman you like is like this. Everything is like this. If you beat Uchiha Kazuki that day, would you be the one walking with her now? So practice hard, Obito. When your shoulders can carry the clan, you will naturally get what you want. Uchiha Obito looked fierce and nodded silently. Setsuna clan elder, continue to practice. I will take back everything that belongs to me. But Uchiha Obito forgot. The young Noera Rin is just an ordinary enthusiastic girl. She helps Uchiha Obito because she wants to encourage every classmate to the best of her ability. Her feelings for Uchiha Obito are far from love. However, for Obito, who was encouraged by her, that small token of kindness was not enough. He wanted to appropriate all of Rin's kindness, forgetting that he had no right to do so. Finally, the third gaze that fell upon Kazuki and his companions was that of Black Zetsu, or rather, Uchiha Rin. How interesting. This Kazuki boy, is he another stranger like Uchiha Kagami, or is he a monster hiding behind a mask? Uchiha Obito is indeed a good seedling to be a chess piece, but Uchiha Setsuna is a waste. How can such poor words give birth to the real darkness in his heart? First let him feel the beauty of the world, and then tear it apart in the most brutal way, so that he can feel despair. Uchiha Rin said cruel words but smiled sweetly. From the perspective of an observer, her smile is more beautiful than Noera Rin. Yes. It's right there, Rin, a little softer. Very good, you're doing great. Your technique is already very delicate. Kazuki gently instructed Rin, who was learning the mystical palm technique. As an A-rank ninjutsu, the learning difficulty of this technique is still too high for the students of the ninja school. After all, even most jonin couldn't master this technique. However, Rin did not let herself be defeated by this difficulty. Even though she was so nervous that there were beads of sweat on her nose, she still tried her best to follow Kazuki's instructions. After a long time, the somewhat exhausted Rin sighed. I still can't do it, Kazuki-kun. Shursui on the side nodded slowly and encouraged. Rin, don't be discouraged. Geniuses like my brother are very rare, but you're already doing very well. Kazuki waved his hand indifferently. I am not a genius at all. I am just a few years older than you. At Rin's age, I can't even master the transformation technique. Shursui and Rin pouted in sync. By this point, no one believed that Kazuki had ever been a mediocre ninja. The mystical palm technique has two key aspects: the creation of medical chakra and precise chakra control. Kazuki's fingers lit up with a little green fluorescence, and he explained. The so-called medical chakra is to decompose chakra into small and soft fragments to heal injuries. Non-attribute chakra is a more moderate choice, and yang-release chakra with a stimulating effect on the body is the best choice. So, the so-called medical ninjutsu practiced to a higher level can be regarded as the same as the secret technique of the Akimichi clan, which is a special use of yang-attribute chakra. As for precise chakra control, it's a matter of constant practice. And Rin, you already have a lot of talent in this area. With daily practice, you will undoubtedly master it. Rin nodded nervously. I will work hard, Kazuki-kun. Rin valued this opportunity greatly. She learned from Kazuki knowledge that was not taught in ninja school, and even details that her instructors would not be able to explain to her after graduation. She was grateful for the opportunity. Kazuki looked at Rin, and an interesting idea came to his mind. Could the Sharingan's copy and hypnotize abilities be combined to create an autopilot-like effect, allowing a hypnotized ninja to perform ninjutsu they normally couldn't, and develop muscle memory? This principle is a bit like teaching a child to ride a bicycle. At the beginning, they still need to be supported to ride, but when the adults quietly let go, the children can still ride well. With the help of psychological suggestion and muscle memory, they have mastered this skill. If Kazuki's conjecture is successful, it could be a quick method to learn advanced ninjutsu. Master Kazuki, at your service. No Ryo needed. You just need to have Kazuki's will of fire in your heart. Tobirama, how about I bet that I can make Rin master the mystical palm technique today? Kazuki sought Tobirama's opinion. After completing the written exam on the will of fire, the second Hokage was a little nervous, eagerly awaiting his results. It could be seen that Tobirama was worried about the possibility of Kazuki getting a perfect score, while he only managed 99 points. Boy, don't speak without thinking. If you can make a 7-year-old girl master an A-level jutsu, then Hiruzen no longer needs the position of headmaster of the ninja school. You should take it instead. Tobirama waved his hand disdainfully. Even if I taught her myself, I couldn't guarantee that she would learn it in a week. Let alone you. Kazuki chuckled. Let's stick to the same rules as always. If I lose, I'll do whatever you ask. If I win, you don't have to bow down to me. I just ask that you guide me in my training from time to time. If you want to worship me as your master, you might as well say it directly, although I won't agree. Tobirama smiled. It seemed like Kazuki was looking for any excuse to get him to teach him. Curiously, Tobirama didn't feel any repulsion towards Kazuki. In fact, he felt somewhat pleased. Although his mouth kept saying that he wouldn't train him, his attitude said otherwise. Old man, you seem a bit narcissistic. I suggest you reflect on your will of fire. Kazuki ruthlessly criticized Tobirama, then turned to Rin and said hesitantly, Rin, I have a rather bold idea. Perhaps it will help you quickly master the mystical palm technique. However, this requires you to trust me very much, and I cannot guarantee that it will succeed. Do you want to try? Rin blinked. Is there such a good thing? Please do it with confidence, Kazuki-kun. I don't mind even if there are risks. Kazuki nodded. In that case, let's go near the Hokage residence and wait for Guy and his father there. To fully master this technique, We need to practice in a real situation. In this way, we can also help Mr. Dewey alleviate his ailments. I have observed Mr. Dewey from afar. Although his body is strong, he has many hidden ailments that could affect his career as a ninja. Rin nodded again and again. If all went well, this would be the first patient she would treat in her life as a kunoichi, which would be an unforgettable memory. Father, I am a genius, a hard-working genius recognized by Kazuki-kun, who is more talented than Kakashi. This is youth. My youth is burning thanks to the inspiration of my friend. Might Guy ran with boundless energy, as if he never ran out of strength. At 7 years old, his mind was still not as firm as it would be in a few years. After suffering a blow, he also questioned himself and felt that Might Dewey's strange clothes were ridiculous. But being told bluntly that he was a genius, and had even inspired him by Kazuki, known as Konoha's greatest genius, only strengthened his resolve. Might Dewey, who was running behind him, looked at his son with satisfaction. At first, he encouraged him loudly, but then his steps began to slow down. Guy, you have found a very good friend. I am proud of you. Might Dewey placed his hand on his waist, where a sharp pain shot through him. Years of malnutrition and grueling training had made this iron-willed man understand the sufferings of hidden injuries. Kazuki-kun, you're training hard today too. Not far away, hearing his son's excited voice, Might Dewey's eyes lit up. He suppressed the pain in his waist, showed his radiant smile and rushed forward. Might Dewey wanted to thank Kazuki, thank her for being the true inspiration for his son's youth. You're looking very cheerful today, Guy. Kazuki responded to Guy's bright flash of teeth with the same gesture, giving him a thumbs up in approval. Shursui and Rin blinked, turned their heads and exchanged glances, and both nodded tacitly. As expected of you, brother/Kazuki-kun, you're so handsome in any action. Guy, I came to you today because I want you to help me with something. Kazuki patted Might Guy's shoulder. You know, I have been practicing medical ninjutsu recently and have some experience. If possible, please allow me to check your body and your father's body. After all, the body burning with youth is more valuable for research. Please forgive me for being presumptuous, Guy. Kazuki skillfully changed the language system to the youth form, but Might Guy's expression gradually became serious. Although Might Guy constantly spoke of youth, even in the exams he could discourse on youth in front of Hiruzen and the Will of Fire. But he was not a fool. He had the intuition of a beast and could distinguish between good and evil in people. However, what this young beast saw was only Kazuki's sincere and pure heart. Kazuki-kun, my lifelong opponent, how can you let me repay this favor? Guy clearly remembered that after a duel with Kazuki that left him exhausted, the mystical palm technique had relieved his tired muscles in such an incredible way that the fatigue disappeared almost instantly. And when Guy came home excitedly to tell his father about this, he learned that it was an A-rank ninjutsu that not even many jonin could master, and even in all of Konoha only a few knew about it. And the few who knew this technique were not someone Guy's family could approach. What are you talking about, Guy? There is no debt to pay. Kazuki smiled as he patted him on the shoulder and said softly, This is the will of fire and youth. You help me, I help you, right? Might Guy clenched his fists, and tears flowed like a stream. Kazuki looked at him curiously. The Might family's tears seemed to flow down in a waterfall. Could this be some kind of special Kekkei Genkai? At that moment, an even more robust man in a tight green suit ran towards them, sobbing, and hugged Guy, even trying to include Kazuki in the hug to cry together. After a while of displays of youth between father and son, Might Dewey introduced himself to Kazuki. Guy, Dad is very happy that you have found a lifelong rival and a youth companion. Kazuki-kun, allow me to introduce myself. I am Guy's father, the crazy Dewey of Konoha. Kazuki nodded seriously and extended his hand to him. Nice to meet you, Mr. Dewey. The hands clasped together, and a strange spark appeared in Dewey's eyes. He beat his chest hard as if he had forgotten the pain in his waist, and exclaimed loudly, Kazuki-kun, you can do anything to my body, please don't hesitate. That's not necessary, don't worry, Mr. Dewey. It's just a simple physical examination. Although Kazuki was a little bit overwhelmed, he kept a smile on his face and motioned Might Dewey, Might Guy and him to go. At this moment, Kazuki also sensed a hidden chakra, locking his position from the direction of the Hokage residence not far away. Telescope technique? Very good. I came to the Hokage residence on purpose to attract your attention. A spark of satisfaction fleetingly crossed Kazuki's eyes as the group arrived at a grassy field. Hiruzen's chakra following closely behind them, not missing a detail. Lie down, Mr. Due. Oh. Got it, Kazuki-kun. Might Due nodded and lay down on the soft grass obediently. Please, I ask you not to make noise during what is coming. The Magatama in Kazuki's eyes slowly turned, and in front of Noera Rin, Might Guy, and the peeping Sarutobi Hiruzen, he opened the double Tomo Sharingan. Noera Rin and Might Guy looked at Kazuki in shock. In the Hokage residence, the third Hokage frowned, but then shook his head and said to himself, Sharingan. That's right, with Kazuki's talent and his feelings for the village and his companions, it would be strange if he didn't awaken the Sharingan. But why show the Sharingan at this time? Sarutobi Hiruzen became curious, and even chose not to deal with the government affairs on the table for the time being, and looked at it attentively. Shursui frowned slightly, but still controlled his expression well. Sharingan has the ability to observe the flow of chakra. This is very effective for treating hidden injuries with medical ninjutsu. Kazuki stared at Might Due's sturdy body and couldn't help but admire it secretly. He was a clear example of how to make the most of limited talent. Although Might Due's body does not look particularly strong, every muscle is full of traces of training and contains extremely amazing power. Especially the meridians in his body, each of which is extremely thick and resilient, several times that of an ordinary person. However, that strength was in contrast to the numerous hidden injuries on his body. Deep bruises embedded in the muscles, small cracks in the organs from overexertion, displaced and aged bones. Without proper nutrition, timely recovery after training, and the use of medication, even the most hardened steel would eventually show cracks after being repeatedly forged day after day. Kazuki sighed from the bottom of his heart, with a hint of admiration in his eyes, and shook his head. Ah. As if responding to Kazuki's expression, Might Due covered his waist in pain and groaned in a low voice. If it weren't for Kazuki offering his help, Might Due might have endured the pain in front of his son, but knowing that there was hope for healing, he finally relaxed. Kazuki, is my father okay? Might Guy first looked at Kazuki, who was full of emotion and regret, and then looked at his father who was fine just now but now groaning, his face full of fear. The matter with your father, well, it's not simple, it's a bit complicated. Kazuki pondered until he heard. From the target Might Guy, you gain a small boost to muscle strength. Finally, he smiled and replied confidently, but it doesn't matter, as long as I am here, there will be no problem. Might Guy exhaled a long breath and shook Kazuki's hand gratefully. Kazuki, thanks to you. Rin, next, it's your turn. Kazuki turned his head and looked at Noera Rin. Are you ready? Rin looked into Kazuki's bright scarlet eyes. Although she didn't know what Kazuki was planning to do, she felt a slight tension within her. Still, she smiled and nodded. I'm ready, Kazuki-kun. Very well. Kazuki nodded, and his ocular power invaded Rin's body. At this moment, the pattern of the Sharingan also appeared in Noera Rin's eyes. Immersed in the genjutsu, Rin was shocked to find that her vision had synchronized with Kazuki's. Even the sensation of manipulating chakra while using the mystical palm technique was as clear as if she were performing it herself. Shursui's talent for genjutsu, placed in Kazuki's hands, made Rin's experience incredibly real. Noera Rin, who was concentrating on her work, didn't realize that when Kazuki carefully cleared the pain in Might Due's body, her hands slowly lit up with green fluorescence. Although the glow was faint, it was unmistakable. She was using the mystical palm technique. Seeing this scene, Sarutobi Hiruzen unconsciously took out his pipe, lit it, and slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. Good boy. This pair of eyes that frightened the world turned into kind eyes in Kazuki's hands. Kagami, perhaps, there will be an Uchiha who surpasses you. Looking at the excellent offspring of his friend, Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed and thought of his rebellious little son. Not even a firm hand could educate him. On the contrary, it only strengthened Asuma's rebellion, who not only refused to recognize his mistakes, but even threatened to run away from home, far away from the hypocritical Hokage and Konoha. Ah. Asuma, why can't you learn from Kazuki? Thinking of this, a glimmer of light flashed in Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes. It seems to be a good idea, let me think about it. At the same time, Senju Tobirama watched Kazuki's operation silently. What did he see? The evil Sharingan of the Uchiha clan has become a teaching tool, allowing a 7-year-old ninja school student to learn A-rank ninjutsu. Senju Tobirama, who has made a bet with Kazuki, does not intend to default. Although not abiding by the agreement will not burden Senju Tobirama's mentality, but facing Kazuki, he does not want to do so from the bottom of his heart. It's nothing more than teaching this kid a few ordinary ninjutsu. After all, breaking one's promise is not in line with the will of fire. Well, that's it. Senju Tobirama said this to himself, but a smile unconsciously appeared on the corner of his mouth. From the target Senju Tobirama, you get fire release, great fire annihilation. The strange reward arrived, but Kazuki didn't pay attention to it. Instead, he repaired Might Dui's body very seriously. Even though fine beads of sweat oozed out of the tip of his nose, the chakra in his palm was as stable as at the beginning. A man who works so hard deserves Kazuki's respect and is worth spending time on. Might Guy nervously watched Kazuki treat his father. His mouth was dry, and he didn't even dare to breathe. Rin, immersed in the world of Genjutsu, seriously watched the way Kazuki handled the mystical palm technique. Shursui looked at Kazuki with admiration. At this moment, he only felt that his brother was the one who understood the will of fire the most in Konoha. And Might Due, for his part, seemed to be floating on a cloud. The pain that he could only bear with willpower in the past was removed from the root by Kazuki, making this Iron Man fall into a deep sleep, even snoring. After a long time, Kazuki nodded and wiped his sweat. Success. Might Guy immediately came over nervously. Kazuki, is my father okay? Before Kazuki answered, Might Due suddenly jumped up from the ground, turned 720 degrees in the air, and landed in an extremely abstract and difficult posture, with tears streaming down his face. My body has rekindled the youth of a boy. Such a strong and powerful youth. Might Due enjoyed his body as if he had been reborn. The relief that came from the elimination of these persistent illnesses that had afflicted him for decades was simply indescribable for a ninja who practices taijutsu. Mr. Due, you will have to come for regular checkups in the future. Intensive training will not be a problem, but you must also take care of your recovery. Kazuki watched Might Due jump back and forth with a smile and spoke to him in a gentle tone. Might Due stopped in his tracks. As an adult, how could he not understand what Kazuki was implying? But when he turned around, Kazuki was already tending to Might Guy. Your body is in good shape, Guy. If there's any problem, come see me. Might Due was feeling a mix of emotions. He didn't like owing others favors, but Kazuki's selfless generosity made him wonder how he could return the favor. Mr. Due, I have a small request. I hope you can consider it. Might Due's heart moved, and he immediately said, Please tell me, Kazuki-kun, as long as I can do it. As you know, Mr. Due, the Uchiha clan does not usually welcome outsiders, and it is difficult to find someone willing to look after our safety. Kazuki smiled awkwardly. As for the treatment, I can only provide food and accommodation, and the compensation is calculated according to the sea-level task. However, if it is Due and Gaikuen, I can also provide the training resources. Might Due was stunned, and his face turned red. For a moment, he thought that Kazuki might have discovered his secret and wanted him to teach him the 8 Gates technique. A strong sense of guilt surged in his heart. Lodging, food, training resources. For someone like him, a simple genin who could barely get low-level missions, these conditions were unthinkable. After hearing this treatment, not only was Might Guy stunned, but even Shursui looked at his brother with a strange look. Although our family has money, isn't this a bit too generous? In the Sengoku period, shinobi clans that hired personal bodyguards rarely offered such good conditions. And now he was offering them to a mere genin? Even if he was the father of a friend, this generosity seemed almost like an act of charity. Might Due stared at Kazuki, and after a moment, he seemed to have made a decision in his heart and nodded with a firm expression. Since it is a favor that Kazuki-kun asks of me, I, the crazy Due, cannot refuse it. Shortly after, a blonde woman with a beautiful figure, a slight blush on her cheeks from the alcohol, watched from afar as Rin, who had awakened from the Genjutsu and was excitedly trying out the mystical palm technique, guided by Kazuki in the details. Slowly, she approached them. Interesting Uchiha kid, are you interested in medical ninjutsu? Big and beautiful. This is Kazuki's first impression of Tsunade. It's not that Kazuki was shallow, but her physical attributes were quite evident. Very interested. Medical ninjutsu can help our companions, allowing them to better take advantage of their potential and survive on the battlefield. Kazuki said, staring into Tsunade's eyes. Kid, the battlefield will only make anyone's fate miserable, and medical ninjutsu can't save anyone. Tsunade said coldly with a trace of disdain and sadness in her eyes. You look 15 or 16 years old, right? How can you still be so naive? Are you another idiot who wants to become Hokage? You are still an Uchiha. I really don't know what to say to you. Senju Tobirama silently looked at his beloved granddaughter, and his heart, which was just happy, suddenly became cold. What kind of experiences had led her to express such bitter words and develop such resentment towards the Hokage? But what worried Tobirama the most was the slight hint of hopelessness he perceived in Tsunade's eyes. Tsunade's words left Guy, Due, Rin, and Shursui stunned. No one expected the disciple of the third Hokage and one of the legendary Sannin of Konoha to say something so rebellious. That definitely doesn't fit with the will of fire. I don't want to be a Hokage. I just want to protect the people around me. Kazuki shook his head and said slowly. Humph, naive kid. Tsunade muttered disdainfully, fixing her gaze on Kazuki's Sharingan and then on Rin, shocked by what she saw. Can the Uchiha clan's Sharingan be used in this way? A little girl who doesn't even wear a shinobi sash, and yet, with the help of the Sharingan, easily masters the mystical palm technique. Tsunade recalled the idea she proposed that year adding a medical nin to each team to ensure the survival rate of the shinobi. If I could have the help of the Sharingan. But just as this thought came up, Tsunade threw it out of her mind. Her important people, from Hashirama, Tobirama to Nawaki, died one after another. She was too tired to think. What's your name? Tsunade asked quietly. Show your mystical palm technique. Medical techniques are not simple ninjutsu. Improper handling will only worsen the patient's injuries. His name is Kazuki, and he is my lifelong opponent. Might Guy frowned and shouted to Tsunade. Kazuki's green ninjutsu is not crude, he uses it very well. How can an ant like you understand the youthful bond between us? Ant. Tsunade narrowed her eyes slightly, and a murderous look appeared in her eyes. Dear Sister Tsunade, please guide me. I really appreciate it. Kazuki kicked Might Guy without a trace, stood in front of him, and gathered exquisite medical chakra in his hands. Kid, at least you know how to talk. Tsunade snorted, shooting a glare at a confused Might Guy before seriously focusing on Kazuki's mystical palm technique. But soon, Tsunade looked more and more seriously, and even the blush on her face gradually dissipated, and she was stunned. Even when it comes to the same technique, each person has a different approach, especially with the mystic palm, which requires extremely precise chakra control. But Kazuki's technique felt strangely familiar and at the same time unfamiliar to Tsunade, plunging her into a sea of thoughts. Kazuki smiled at Tsunade, and there was even a trace of kindness in her eyes. Tsunade, stunned, kept her gaze fixed on Kazuki, and memories of 30 years ago unfolded before her eyes. At that time, she was still a little girl, younger than Noera Rin. Sitting on the desk of her second grandfather and making a fuss, the helpless Senju Tobirama could only coax her gently and teach Tsunade the mystical palm technique that she had been thinking about. It can be said that those were the most carefree days in Tsunade's life. But soon, the nightmare began. Her loved ones died in battle one after another, and those companions and teachers she once knew began to become unrecognizable, some following the prophecies of the toads, others pursuing immortality, and others intoxicated by the intrigues of power. Tsunade was left alone, wandering in this strange shinobi world. After a long time, Tsunade woke up, looking at Kazuki's Sharingan and carrying eyes with a complicated expression, and she couldn't help but sigh in her mind, he looks so much alike, he really does. But Kazuki's Sharingan reminded Tsunade of the difference between the two and made her feel absurd and funny. If the second grandfather knew that he thought a Uchiha kid was very similar to him, would he be so angry that he ran back from the Pure Land to scold her? But if it could come true, Tsunade wouldn't mind doing it. You have learned the mystical palm technique very well. You are very talented. Tsunade sighed weakly, and her hands also lit up with fluorescence. She said slowly, but you can still improve. I will demonstrate the nature change of yang release chakra. Watch carefully. Tsunade's mystical palm technique changed its form. She was confident in the use of medical ninjutsu. Even Senju Tobirama, who taught her in the past, would not be stronger than her. Kazuki nodded, the tomo in his eyes rotated, and he carefully observed the flow of chakra in Tsunade's body. Kazuki easily imitated Tsunade's special mystic palm technique and said with a smile, "Is that so?" Tsunade, who had just come out of her reverie, was once again puzzled. When she was a child, Every time Tsunade came up with a little trick to show off to Senju Tobirama, she would experience this scene. The second grandfather, who was extremely talented, could always replicate her ninjutsu in the next moment, and then gently touched her head. "I have nothing more to teach you, child Kazuki," Tsunade said with a long sigh, carefully observing Kazuki's face, and after a moment of thought, she turned around and left. However, her eyes filled with tears inexplicably. Kazuki watched her silently as she walked away. But Senju Tobirama couldn't help it anymore. "Kazuki, tell me what's wrong with Tsunade? I only know a rough idea about her." Kazuki did not keep Tobirama on hold. It was obvious that the former second Hokage was really anxious. Her brother Nawaki died in the Second Shinobi World War, and it seems a love interest died as well. In that war, Hanzo of the Salamander fought against Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya, and gave them the title of the Sannin, which made them famous in Konoha for a time. But I heard that there seems to be a rift in the relationship between these three people recently, and even conflicts with their teacher, the third Hokage. According to rumors, she suffers from hemophobia and will faint when she sees blood, but it is not certain whether it is true or not. Senju Tobirama frowned. Is even Nawaki dead? But he did not think too much about it. War is so cruel. Even he, the second Hokage, died, let alone Nawaki. But even so, Tsunade's experience still made him feel heartbroken. "It can't be helped, Tobirama." Kazuki sat beside Senju Tobirama and said with emotion, "Tsunade's childhood was enviable, with such a high origin and many loved ones who adored her, but the turn in her destiny was surprisingly fast. The continuous changes and wars, as well as your treatment of the Senju clan, made it almost impossible for her to find those relatives who loved her, and her former companions also went on other paths. This feeling of being alone is quite fatal for a woman, right?" Senju Tobirama remained silent. He did not doubt what Kazuki said about Tsunade's life experience. The shinobi world is such a world. After everyone has different goals, former friends and partners will become strangers, and even kill each other. Bonds, friendships, teachers and students, killing each other to achieve goals is the norm. But this is not the key. The key is that when Senju Tobirama saw Tsunade's disdain for being a Hokage and the uncontrollable sadness in her eyes, he really felt sad. Konoha was a village built to protect everyone, but it didn't even protect the Hokage's closest people. Tsunade. Senju Tobirama shook his head, and he suddenly panicked about the future of Konoha. Even if there are various reasons, even the granddaughter of 2 generations of Hokage disdains becoming a Hokage. Will the future of this village really be good? What is Konoha like now under the governance of Sarutobi Hiruzen and Shimura Danzo? Is it Tsunade's personal tragedy, or has the whole village had problems? Senju Tobirama pondered, and his complex emotions entangled his heart. Kazuki has different ideas. There are many ways to enter the master-disciple inheritance of the Hokage line. In a broad sense, any blood or master-disciple connection to a Hokage could be considered as such. Kazuki is the descendant of Uchiha Kagami, and in the master-disciple inheritance, the only ones in front of Kazuki now are Orochimaru, Tsunade and Namake's Minato, and the possibility of Jiraiya accepting a disciple is very small. Originally, Kazuki planned to take over Uchiha Obito's position and become Namake's Minato's disciple, but in fact, it would be a better choice if he could become Tsunade's disciple. After all, Minato's abilities weren't much different from Tobirama's. Even if Kazuki linked him as a target, there would be redundancies. But Tsunade was different. The blood of Hashirama and Uzumaki Mito ran through her veins, with a natural talent for sealing techniques. And her figure, appearance, etc. are all quite to Kazuki's taste. Sometimes, to become Hokage, you have to first become the Hokage's man. Tobirama, this is why I summoned your soul into my body. The current hidden village system cannot bring peace to Konoha and the shinobi world, Kazuki said, looking up at the blue sky, sharing his perspective with Tobirama's. This is not your fault, but it still needs someone to solve it. Maybe the shinobi world will usher in real peace one day, but during this period, there will be many people who will experience what Tsunade has experienced, or 10,000 times more tragic than her. I don't want to wait that long. Senju Tobirama nodded slowly. If there is anyone who can judge the situation in the shinobi world most clearly and thoroughly, it can only be him. In this regard, Uchiha Madara is not good enough, and Senju Hashirama is even worse. But Kazuki's next words temporarily made him forget the sadness brought by Tsunade. Although I wanted to borrow your wisdom, I found that you are useless. I have to do it myself. From the target Senju Tobirama, Kenjutsu, UCHIHA Izuna Senju Tobirama Analysis Version. Kazuki brat. Senju Tobirama gritted his teeth and was about to refute, when he heard Kazuki continue leisurely. Hush, the test paper of the Will of Fire will be released tomorrow. I suggest you take a look at the score before refutation, respected second Hokage. Ridiculous, if I can't beat you in the test, there is no need to carve my statue on the Hokage rock, just replace it with yours. Senju Tobirama waved his hand. His expression was very firm and confident. Kazuki shrugged. Senju Tobirama might be a good Hokage and a good teacher, but he is definitely not a good student. No matter how good the answers were, if they started with sermons and criticism, the evaluator would hardly give them a high grade. The Will of Fire test tests obedience, not your true understanding of the Will of Fire. The next day, Ninja School. Kazuki looked at the full-marked test paper in his hand and Sarutobi Hiruzen's careful comments and nodded casually. For him, this was no different from writing an elementary school composition. And when he saw Kazuki's full score, Senju Tobirama had already sensed something was wrong, and was still stubbornly saying, "It's nothing more than a tie." At this time, a bad cry sounded from the front. Woo woo woo. What did I write? Why did I answer such a thing? Inada Kojiro burst into tears, crying bitterly at the harsh comments of the third Hokage. Tobirama was completely petrified. "Hey Tobirama, look at what you wrote," it made the kid cry. The classmates around him all looked at Kojiro Inada with strange eyes. It's really hard to get a high score in the course of Will of Fire, but it's basically easy to get a pass. As long as you don't curse the Hokage, you can basically get a pass. Even though Uchiha Obito gave such a rebellious answer, Sarutobi Hiruzen gave him a 60 out of consideration. In the entire ninja school, apart from Uchiha Obito who felt that he was being targeted, only Sarutobi Asuma and Kojiro Inada were unhappy. Impossible, maybe my answer was too good, and the high score surprised the kid too much. Senju Tobirama felt bad, but he was still very stubborn. Kazuki shrugged, walked over slowly, sat next to Inada Kojiro, and comforted him softly. At the same time, Kazuki picked up his test paper and almost laughed out loud in a very impolite manner. The gigantic red number on the exam paper had a devastating impact, a huge 0, accompanied by an angry exclamation mark. And below that 0, there was an even more extensive note than the one Kazuki had received. Ambitious but shallow, impatient and impulsive. The Will of Fire is not just theory. Learn to be a ninja first. That's what you must do. Kazuki didn't hold back and entered the space where Tobirama was, and let out a crazy laugh characteristic of an Uchiha. At that moment, Kazuki forgot his role and just wanted to mock the Hokage in front of him, laughing so hard that he almost sounded like a pig. The condescending tone between the words, combined with the unusual difficulty of this set of test papers, Kazuki was almost certain that everything from setting the questions to grading the papers was definitely written by Sarutobi Hiruzen. Tobirama stood still, staring at Hiruzen's note, but he was turning red with embarrassment and rage, as if he was about to explode. Unlike Kazuki, Tobirama didn't need to analyze much. He recognized Hiruzen's handwriting instantly. Tobirama really didn't expect his disciple Hiruzen to give his answer a 0. And on top of that, with such a harsh criticism. Okay. Senju Tobirama muttered to himself. You'd better not let me get the chance, monkey. Let me think about it. What did a certain Hokage say? Kazuki smiled and counted on his fingers. The score is too high to surprise people. Writing a perfect test paper is also a teaching. If the score is not as high as mine, someone's Hokage rock will be replaced with my avatar. What else? Or can you help me think about it? After all, it's all your own words. You must remember it better than me. Hey, this is another kind of full score. There is no score, it's a reverse full score. Senju Tobirama gnashed his teeth silently. This is because he died. Otherwise he would have rushed into the Hokage residence with a belt, and Sarutobi Hiruzen must know who is the master. From the target Senju Tobirama, you get ninjutsu, chakra-enhanced strength. Kazuki couldn't help but laugh. This reward seemed to be quite in line with Senju Tobirama's mood at the moment. Did he want to punch Sarutobi Hiruzen in the head? Okay, Tobirama. Sarutobi Hiruzen doesn't know that it was you who answered the test paper. Who told you to be so direct? That won't work either. What I said were all good advice to criticize the current situation. Why does he dare to say that to me? Senju Tobirama waved his hand and said in a faint tone, "Monkey, you'd better manage the village flawlessly, otherwise you'd better pray that you don't have the chance to see me. Little boy, do me a favor." Senju Tobirama gradually cooled down, looked at the very sad Inada Kojiro, and whispered, "Help comfort that kid. Although I didn't know that the exam was done by the monkey, but this kind of scolding is too harsh. After all, this was my fault." Kazuki nodded. This old man still had some heart, but he didn't answer, just nodded at him. Seeing this, Senju Tobirama sighed helplessly. I know, I will teach you a few ninjutsu, I won't regret it. But don't get me wrong, it's just a casual teaching, not a master-disciple relationship." Kazuki let out a mocking laugh after hearing what Tobirama said, then gave him a contemptuous look. "I'm a Konoha ninja. Have you heard of any Konoha ninja becoming the disciple of someone who got a 0 in the Will of Fire? You think too much of yourself, Tobirama." Tobirama's eyes flashed dangerously. But Kazuki spread his hands indifferently. With an attitude of "you can't do anything to me," he let out a laugh, turned around and left with a very carefree air. "Kazuki, what should I do? I definitely can't become a ninja. If I can't become a ninja, how can I make money? If I can't make money, my dream will be shattered." When Inada Kojiro saw the gentle Kazuki, he cried even louder. "My lifelong dream is to inherit the secret dango recipe left by my grandfather and save enough money to open a 3-color dango shop. Why did I have to hand in such a disastrous exam?" Kazuki was a little surprised when he heard it. "Is this your dream, Inada?" Kazuki silently looked at the test paper in his hand again. This child is probably not suitable to be a ninja. In that case, don't be a ninja. Inada Kojiro cried even louder. Even Kazuki said so. He probably really has no hope. Go open a dango shop. The shop next to Ichiraku Ramen belongs to my family. Go work there, Inada. Kazuki patted his shoulder. I won't charge rent until you come of age. We'll talk about profit sharing after you start the business. First, try to make the 3-color dango more delicious. Inada Kojiro stopped crying immediately, and his hands began to tremble. Really, Kazuki-kun. At the back of the room, Asuma was rubbing his still sore, but as he looked at the scene with a complicated expression. His mind was in a mess. Asuma couldn't figure out what the Will of Fire was. In his opinion, if Kazuki followed the Will of Fire, he should cheer for Kojiro Inada and told him not to be discouraged and continue to work hard to become a Konoha ninja. But Kazuki didn't do that, and directly funded Kojiro Inada to open a store. Why? Why did Kazuki encourage someone like Guy to advance step by step, but not Inada? But seeing Kojiro Inada's happy smile, Asuma fell into confusion. Is it such a happy thing to not be a ninja? But that smile from the heart can't be faked, which means that Kazuki did nothing wrong. Asuma slowly crumpled the Will of Fire test paper in his hand into a ball, stared at Kazuki intently, slowly exhaled a breath of turbid air, and his eyes became firm. He has decided to find a suitable time to ask Kazuki in person what the Will of Fire is. Compared to the hypocritical and uncomfortable scenes he heard and witnessed at home, he believed more in Kazuki, who made his friends and classmates smile. Kazuki kid, I asked you to help him, not to ask him not to be a ninja. Senju Tobirama frowned, seeming a little dissatisfied. What's the use? Be a ninja to die. Kazuki shook his head and said slowly, a student with such limited talent that he can barely master the 3 basic techniques, even if he gives 110%, would be lucky to even make it to Chunin in his lifetime. He would most likely end up being a genin forever. When the war comes in a few years, people like him will be cannon fodder, and even their bones will not be found on the battlefield. So tell me, does Konoha need more cannon fodder or a good shop owner who makes the best 3-colored dango Tobirama? Senju Tobirama was stunned. He didn't think about it from this aspect. But after careful consideration, he felt that what Kazuki said was correct, but there seemed to be something strange. Senju Tobirama was silent, and after a moment he slowly nodded. Maybe what you did is right. Learn from me, Tobirama. Kazuki shrugged. Of course what I did is right, otherwise how could you, who got 0 points, be right? Evil Uchiha kid. It's so delicious, Kazuki, your cooking skills are really good. At the dining table in Kazuki's house, Guy was devouring the meat with enthusiasm, launching youthful attacks with his chopsticks at the plates in front of him, enjoying every bite. In a short while, he had eaten 8 bowls of rice. Although Kazuki's eating manners were gentler, his appetite was not inferior to Might Guy at all. Might Due watched with a mixture of sadness, gratitude, and shyness as his son devoured his food. Although he always spoke of youth, Might Due was an adult with a mature mind. The food on the table, from red to white meat, from chicken, duck, fish to medicinal dishes, was meticulously prepared, as if it had been precisely calculated. To be honest, not even the Hokage's house would have such an opulent meal. Only then did Due understand what Kazuki meant by, "I will provide you with food and lodging," and what kind of treatment he was receiving. "Due-san, pick up your chopsticks. Why are you just watching?" Just as Might Due was watching silently, waiting for Kazuki and Shursui to eat first, Kazuki placed a large bowl of beef in front of him with a smile, and handed him a bowl of rice. "If you don't eat enough, you will get sick from overwork and training, and I will have to continue to help you recuperate. Do you trust me so much, Due-san? Don't be shy, eat well so you have energy to protect our home. This is all part of the deal we agreed on." Due stared blankly at Kazuki in front of him, who seemed to be blaming him, and smelled the aroma of beef, and was a little dazed for a while. Due, who had been struggling in Konoha for decades and had never been valued by others, felt the respect and warmth from others for the first time. But Kazuki is an Uchiha. So what if he's an Uchiha? Due thought as he took a deep breath and nodded determinedly at Kazuki. Without further ado, he grabbed a rib that Guy had his eye on and began to eat it with relish. "Father. Guy, eating is also a kind of practice. If you don't treat Kazuki's food with a youthful attitude, it would be a sin." Might Due laughed and gave Kazuki a thumbs up. "Don't worry, Kazuki. I'll be a great guardian for your home." Due emphasized the words, "your home," with determination. "I always believe in you, Due-san." Kazuki smiled and gave a thumbs up. Kazuki didn't mind that Due and Guy ate a lot. On the contrary, the more they eat, the better. Due and Guy, who had grown up with limited resources, were now regaining their health, eating well, and when the time came to unleash their youth, perhaps they would not only kick the 7 swordsmen of the mist to death, but they might even kick Uchiha Madara Uchiha to death. Anyway, it is definitely impossible for Kazuki to be kicked. It's just a few dozen tons of meat. Compared with the power of Night Guy, it is simply cheap. No one in Konoha is willing to do this round of angel investment, and Kazuki will certainly not let it go. Shursui, who was watching this scene, snorted coldly. Although he felt that his family did not need a guard, as a qualified younger brother, he would not question his brother's decision. But Shursui promised himself that he would eat more than everyone else. Shursui ate with such fervor that his face turned red, as he looked determinedly at Guy, determined to surpass him. "That's all, Guy." After finishing eating, Due jumped up, full of energy. The current training consists of washing all the dishes in 3 minutes, then mopping the floor 3 times and finally leaving the patio spotless. "Oh, I know, father. By the way, Kazuki-kun, Kakashi told me today that if you want to spar with him, go to the No. 1 training ground in the village on the weekend. He will wait for you there." Might Guy scratched his head embarrassedly. The meal was so delicious that he forgot what his friend had said. With that, Guy hurried off to collect the dishes, following Due, who was already washing the dishes. "Hey, I used to wash the dishes at home." Shursui slapped the table. "No, I want to wash the dishes too." Kazuki smiled and looked at the 3 people who were scrambling to wash the dishes, and his eyes narrowed. Kakashi wanted to train with him. What did that mean? A challenge from genius to genius? On the other hand, Tobirama watched the scene with a complex look. He wondered how the lonely Tsunade was doing right now. Konoha No.1 training ground. The sharp blade light flashed in the field. Kakashi was holding a short blade and practicing with his father Hatake Tsukumo. Hatake Tsukumo nodded slightly, and lightly used the white fang in his hand to push away Kakashi's blade, and said with a smile, "Your mind is a little confused, you need to focus." Kakashi was startled, and before he could react, the edge of the white fang was already on his neck, emitting a bone-chilling cold. "Kakashi, don't worry about the title of genius. Even though you are my son, you have already done quite well," Tsukumo said, deftly putting away his sword and gently ruffling Kakashi's hair. In the shinobi world, there are always some amazing people who can't be simply described as geniuses, such as the first Hokage, Uchiha Madara, and the second Hokage. Kakashi raised his head stubbornly and said in a deep voice, "Father, do you think Uchiha Kazuki has a talent comparable to the second Hokage? Some people in the village have said that his water release seems to be very similar to the second Hokage." Since Due became the guardian of Kazuki's home, Guy, who used to insist on challenging Kakashi, had disappeared. And Obito, who awakened the Sharingan, no longer went to find him, but immersed himself in Uchiha Setsuna's special treatment. The lone genius, after suddenly losing the harassment of the two tail ends, actually felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. After Kazuki showed some strength, the village started talking about the boring but hot topic of the first genius again. In the dead of night, Kakashi was also thinking, who is stronger between him and Kazuki? Sometimes he would consider Kazuki's age, but Kakashi always thought that he was the strongest among his peers, and he still thought that as the son of Hatake Tsukumo, he was still the strongest among his peers. So, Kakashi invited Kazuki to compete, and even asked his father to watch the game today. Kakashi knew that his father had a vision far keener than anyone else, able to discern the inner potential of a shinobi. Hatake Tsukumo stared at his son's eyes and shook his head slowly. Kakashi, it doesn't matter whether Uchiha Kazuki is more talented than you or not, but you have to learn to recognize your own heart, not be distracted by external things, and focus on your own practice. Practicing ninjutsu and kenjutsu requires a state of concentration. When you are burdened by reputation and the words of others, your sword will become blunt, and your heart will not be at peace. If so, there will be problems in the future. Tsukumo looked at Kakashi's puzzled expression and laughed. These are teachings that our ancestors in the Hatake clan, when we were still samurai, passed down to us. And although I am your father, I cannot always follow them to the letter either. Come on, Kakashi. Just at that moment, Kazuki arrived at the training grounds, and when he heard Tsukumo's words, he couldn't help but have a somewhat strange expression. Kazuki slowly approached Tsukumo and Kakashi, greeting first Kakashi and then Tsukumo in a respectful and curious tone. Kakashi-kun, Tsukumo-san, good morning. Although Tsukumo had a great reputation, Kazuki did not really know his fighting style. But with just one glance, Kazuki could tell that Tsukumo was incredibly strong. His entire being seemed like a hidden sharp sword, inconspicuous to the naked eye, but only because it had not yet emerged from its sheath. It's him. This little guy, has he grown up to this point? Tobirama looked at Tsukumo with a sincere smile. When I saw him in the ninja school, I had a hunch that this kid has potential and talent. Now he is also an amazing ninja, very good, he can be regarded as a civilian leader. Sensing the doubt in Kazuki's mind, Tobirama continued to explain. The Hatake clan, during the Sengoku period, established themselves in the shinobi world following the way of the samurai. However, they later fell victim to revenge, and when Konoha was founded, Tsukumo was the only survivor. It's called the Shinobi clan, but it's just a name. Kazuki nodded, understanding the explanation. Not for nothing was Tobirama the creator of the ANBU. His knowledge of the ancient history of the shinobi world was impressive. However, Kazuki asked him, Tobirama, who asked you? My opinion is that if you didn't assign him a teacher from the Hokage line, your predictions aren't worth much. Tsukumo grew up only thanks to his natural talent. Haha, the genius that emerged during my reign didn't have my credit? Childish. Kazuki shrugged. Kazuki-kun, for ninjas like us, fighting with most of our peers of similar age is meaningless, and facing older, more experienced shinobi is not always convenient. Kakashi nodded to Kazuki, and when his eyes fell on the Muramasa sword, he paused for a moment before continuing. So, I want to verify the results of my training with you. Please forgive me for bothering you. In this fight, if possible, I would like us to fight with all our power. My father will be present to intervene if any problems arise. Kazuki nodded slightly. Kakashi had thought of everything, and he was right. But what Kakashi didn't understand was that for Kazuki, facing him didn't make much sense either. Kazuki smiled to himself, looking at Kakashi's slightly defiant face. Since Kakashi-kun has considered it so thoroughly, then I will accept it. But in reality, what Kazuki wanted was to face the kind man behind Kakashi, Tsukumo Hatake. This man was a Kaga-level ninja, the ideal opponent for Kazuki to assess his own power and better understand his level. After all, Uchiha Madara is paying attention to Kazuki. If he doesn't understand his own strength, he may be in great trouble one day. What could that old man possibly be planning? Even Kazuki couldn't foresee it. I'll defeat Kakashi first, and if the opportunity arises, I'll try Hatake Tsukumo. Kakashi and Kazuki stood opposite each other. Tsukumo watched Kakashi and Kazuki with his arms crossed, his gaze shining with anticipation. Although he had said that he didn't want Kakashi to feel pressured, as a father, he couldn't help but feel expectations about his son's performance. Kazuki, here I come. Come on, Kakashi. As soon as they finished speaking, Kakashi charged forward, raising his speed to the maximum in a single fluid movement. The short sword in his hand was raised in a defensive stance, and with barely perceptible steps, he quickly approached Kazuki. It's a true combination of samurai and ninja. It combines the brute force of a samurai with the speed of a ninja. Kazuki thought to himself, as he raised his Muramasa sword. Behind the black membrane in his eyes, the Sharingan began to slowly spin. Kazuki casually swung his sword to the right. In the next instant, as if Kakashi had thrown himself directly at him, his short sword accurately collided with the Muramasa sword, producing a metallic clang. Kakashi's pupils suddenly dilated. Was it just a coincidence? There's no way he predicted my position so accurately. On the other hand, Tsukumo's expression became more serious. He didn't think it was a coincidence. In a melee combat as demanding as a sword duel, every movement had to be extremely efficient, otherwise, one would lose rhythm, becoming vulnerable and very passive. Kazuki felt the power coming from the short sword and laughed. Kakashi, I am a few years older than you, so I have taken some advantage. Please don't mind. After that, Kazuki firmly pressed the blade of Muramasa against the short sword, and the power continued to increase. Kakashi immediately felt the difficulty of holding the weapon. Kazuki's strength completely crushed him, and the blade of his short sword seemed to be stuck by a magnet, forcing him to face Kazuki in a duel of strength. It only took one miscalculation for Kakashi to be at a complete disadvantage, and in the blink of an eye, the situation was tipping towards defeat. Uchiha Kazuki's power is not normal. Hatake Tsukumo stared at Kazuki's arm. He knew Kakashi's strength. Although he could not compete with him, he was not completely at a disadvantage among the special jonin. But seeing the current situation, Tsukumo even began to wonder who would be stronger, him or Kazuki. Sweat was pouring down Kakashi's forehead. His arms were feeling increasingly heavy and weak, and he couldn't take his eyes off Muramasa's hypnotic blade. If he tried to dodge, Muramasa would use the momentum to quickly cut him down. If this continues, I will lose my strength, and the competition will be over. With determination, Kakashi suddenly relaxed his grip and, taking advantage of the fall of Kazuki's sword, threw a shuriken hidden in his sleeve, aiming directly for Kazuki's throat. Good strategy. Kazuki slightly turned sideways to avoid the shuriken, and Kakashi quickly distanced himself from Kazuki. My body is still too weak. Although a ninja has enough strength to move mountains, he is still vulnerable to conventional weapons. If this shortcoming can be made up, safety will be greatly improved, and it will be of great benefit to the battle. While Kakashi was relieving his sore arms, Kazuki was also reflecting on this battle. At that moment, an electronic voice resonated in Kazuki's mind. Detected a strong desire to win in Hatake Kakashi towards the host. Target linked. Kazuki's eyes lit up. Kakashi's desire to win seemed to be stronger than he thought. Kakashi, it seems I can't hold back anymore. Kazuki's eyes changed, and the Muramasa in his hand burned with a raging fire. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as a sense of danger washed over him. Earth release, Earth-style wall. The towering earth wall stood in front of Kakashi, giving him a little sense of security. Wow! This chakra level is quite impressive. Kazuki looked up at the towering earth wall. As a 7-year-old ninja, this is definitely not something that a ninja with insufficient chakra can release. But it's useless, Kakashi. Kazuki swung his Muramasa sword. The flames on the sword transformed into a fire dragon that charged at the wall, melting it with its intense heat. Teisuke flashy. This kid still learned the swordsmanship of that bastard. Senju Tobirama curled his lips. Kakashi, on the other hand, watching his wall melt in the flames, was left speechless. And then Kazuki fell from the sky, engulfed in fire, and cut it down with a deadpan attitude. But at that moment, a blue chakra slash shot out from the side, colliding with Muramasa. Boom! Suddenly, the dust covered the training ground. Kazuki narrowed his eyes, feeling the numbness in his hands, and looked at Tsukumo, who had an apologetic expression on his face. At this moment, Kazuki finally saw Hatake Tsukumo's fighting style. Kakashi was stunned on the ground, looking at Kazuki, who was still calm, and finally realized the gap between them. From the target Hatake Kakashi, you gain the lightning chakra attribute. From Uchiha Madara's target, you gain the fire release ninjutsu. Kazuki had gotten the rewards he expected, albeit with an added surprise. He sighed deeply, looking around, but found nothing strange. No, why is there an old man peeping? That's enough. Do you understand what distance is? Mountain's graveyard. Uchiha Madara was half reclining on a wide chair, his mind filled with the image of Kazuki holding the Muramasa sword. The sharp blade and the flames that filled the sky, along with that sword technique and cold gaze. That stance, in the entire shinobi world, was only matched by that of his brother, Uchiha Izuna. Especially the way Kazuki used the Muramasa sword, and the fire release techniques were identical to Izuna's. Even Madara had the feeling of having traveled back in time, of having returned decades ago, to the moment when his brother was enthusiastically showing him his kenjutsu. Izuna. Uchiha Madara recalled his younger brother, the best younger brother. Uchiha Izuna's life, thinking back carefully, is a life dedicated to Uchiha Madara. As a child, Izuna was his spiritual pillar, and as he grew up, he became his advisor and support in combat. He never left any offspring, and in the end, he voluntarily chose to gift Madara his Mangekyo Sharingan, dying in his prime. Even though Madara was an unparalleled genius, and ruled the shinobi world as the feared Shura of the shinobi world. But for his younger brother, Uchiha Madara owed nothing but debt. As a traditional Uchiha older brother who failed to protect his beloved younger brother, and was constantly cared for by him, Madara felt unspeakable guilt towards Izuna. In a trance, Uchiha Madara suddenly thought of a possibility that made his heart tighten. Why did Kazuki know Izuna's kenjutsu? Madara had taken almost all of Izuna's techniques and belongings with him when he left the village. He only left the Muramasa sword, which Izuna had personally gifted to a close friend. So Madara decided not to take it. But somehow, that sword was now in the hands of Kazuki, who had, in addition, somehow mastered Izuna's kenjutsu. So, could it be possible that Kazuki is the reincarnation of Izuna? After all, the Pure Land is real, and the souls of the dead have not perished, and the impure world reincarnation technique has proved this. Thinking of this, Madara began to tremble and slowly closed his eyes. He was thinking about how to contact Kazuki, and even more thinking about whether his plan needed to be changed. But no matter what, the figures of Kazuki and Izuna were intertwined and flashing in Uchiha Madara's mind, as if they had merged into one. Ah! A sigh, a mixture of emotion and heaviness, echoed in the cave for a long time. On the training ground, Kakashi was lying on the ground, staring in shock at the Muramasa, engulfed in flames, and at Kazuki frowning. He had imagined many times what it would be like to face Kazuki, but he never thought that he had already reached the level to stop his father's attack. Is this the real genius? Kakashi clenched his fists tightly, remembering with shame the title of Konoha's first genius that he had enjoyed for several years. Tsukumo narrowed his eyes, watching Kazuki intently, as he thought, "This young man is amazing. I can't see through him." But Kazuki was in no mood to care about Tsukumo and his son at this moment. The strongest and most ruthless old man in the shinobi world just exploded a wave of large gold coins in a very heroic manner, and directly rewarded Kazuki with a full set of fire release ninjutsu. This force is comparable to the first gold coin explosion that Kazuki obtained from Tobirama using the system information gap. Bah, if he wants to look, let him look a little. Crazy old man. Kazuki sighed resignedly in his heart. After all, the man had paid, gifting him a complete set of fire release ninjutsu. As for blacklisting Uchiha Madara's viewing rights, Kazuki can't do it for the time being. Who told him to have the demonic statue of the outer path and the white zetsu? Since he can't resist, he can only choose to enjoy it. However, Kazuki didn't know at this time that Uchiha Madara had already started his fantasy time. Kazuki-kun, I'm sorry. Hatake Tsukumo walked over slowly, with sincere apology in his eyes. In order to protect his son, he had attacked more seriously than necessary, even launching a sword technique of great destructive power. In theory, a ninja of his level should not have used so much force to supervise a simple practice between two children. But the problem is that Hatake Tsukumo also underestimated Kazuki's strength. He didn't expect him to be so fierce. It's okay, Tsukumo-san. I also forgot that Kakashi is still a child. Kazuki glanced at Kakashi with a smile, turned to Hatake Tsukumo and said, "Is that move just now the secret technique of the Hatake clan? It's really an amazing slash." Hatake Tsukumo nodded. It is a technique that involves releasing invisible chakra through the movement of the sword, inherited from the ancestors of the Hatake clan and from my own understanding as a ninja. It is my own creation. Awesome. Kazuki looked at the shining sword, the white fang in Tsukumo's hands, and said softly, Tsukumo-san, I rarely get the chance to face a sword master like you. Since I have the honor today, could you teach me a few moves? Kakashi raised his head suddenly when he heard it. He was already very upset when Kazuki said that he was still a child. And now, Kazuki seems to want to challenge his father. Hey, Uchiha Kazuki, you're still a student who has not graduated from the ninja school. Kakashi was about to refute Kazuki, but as soon as he said the beginning of the words, he became more and more unconfident. So what if you haven't graduated from the ninja school? Even if you are a special jonin, can you withstand Hatake Tsukumo's slash? Hatake Tsukumo hesitated for a moment, then took a serious look at the Muramasa in Kazuki's hand, then smiled and nodded. I am also very interested in your swordsmanship, Kazuki. Then, let's just exchange a few moves. Kakashi-kun, please move aside, the fight may be a bit intense. Kakashi, still sitting on the ground, stood there stunned, looking at his father, who was also motioning for him to get up. He reluctantly walked away to the edge of the training field, watching the two fighters intently. Then, let's get started, Tsukumo-san. Kazuki raised his Muramasa sword and took a deep breath. The Sharingan behind Kazuki's water film spun rapidly. The Muramasa sword he held in his hands also burst into even more intense flames. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, Muramasa's sharp blade, wrapped in fire, swooped down on Tsukumo from a strange angle. So fast. Kakashi was shocked. Even though he had tried his best to observe the battle, Kazuki's speed had exceeded his imagination. He could only see the afterimage. Kakashi's eyes widened, his eyes full of unwillingness. Clang! Tsukumo's white fang, enveloped in dense chakra, accurately stopped Muramasa's blade. Kazuki narrowed his eyes and thought, my speed is obviously within the perception of Hatake Tsukumo. I am generally weaker than him, so he is so calm. But I need to test his strength. No, I must give everything I have and cut him down with all my might. Kazuki pulled back his sword, his muscles tensing and chakra concentrating in his arm, increasing his power, while his Sharingan spun, releasing a genjutsu against Tsukumo. Combining Tobirama's chakra-enhanced strength, the power of the Sharingan, along with the kenjutsu of Uchiha Izuna and Senju Tobirama, Kazuki had managed to perfectly fuse the advantages of the two into his own style. Senju Tobirama narrowed his eyes, feeling the power of this sword, and snorted. There's no need to make it so complicated. With my Senju-style kenjutsu, I wouldn't lose to the Hatake clan's techniques. But I have to admit, kid, you've made a good combination. It's a problematic cut. Despite his words, Kazuki's slash evoked memories of himself and Izuna in Tobirama, and he even vaguely sensed the powerful harmony between the Senju and Uchiha techniques. Hatake Tsukumo and Kazuki looked at each other. For some reason, Kazuki's deep eyes made Tsukumo feel momentarily stunned. And in that brief instant, Kazuki's heavy sword broke the safety distance and roared toward Tsukumo's chest. Tsukumo, surprised with his willpower and experience, managed to break free from the genjutsu in an instant. However, in a close-range sword fight, every opportunity is particularly important. The White Fang tried to keep up, but Muramasa, propelled by explosive force, overcame Tsukumo's defense. Muramasa, pushed by Kazuki's force, seemed to go wild, as if it wanted to destroy both Tsukumo's short sword and himself. Tsukumo's chakra surged violently, and in an instant his speed reached its limit, using the force of Muramasa's sword on the White Fang to push himself away, dodging the attack with great difficulty. It can't be. My father was pushed back by Uchiha Kazuki. Kakashi was at a loss. This scene was beyond his cognition. In the past training with his father, no matter how hard Kakashi tried, Hatake Tsukumo always stood there with a smile, without even moving his feet, and easily resolved his attack. For a long time, Kakashi's short-term training goal was to see Hatake Tsukumo move when he practiced with him. Blood was running down Tsukumo's chest. A not very deep but clearly visible wound ran through his clothes. Kazuki slowly exhaled a long breath. He felt respect for Hatake Tsukumo's strength from the bottom of his heart. That cut had been the best he could do with his current strength. Great, really great, Kazuki-kun. Hatake Tsukumo casually looked down at the wound on his chest and said with a smile, fortunately you are still a child, and your body has not yet matured, otherwise, I am afraid I would have to be rescued. Kazuki shook his head. Although his youth prevented his body from unleashing its full strength, that did not concern him. In the shinobi world, surviving to adulthood as a genius was already a considerable achievement and the greatest talent one could have. When talent cannot be converted into strength, It is just a worthless reputation. Tsukumo-san, please don't hold back. I want to see the true full strength of a ninja like you. Kazuki looked at Hatake Tsukumo seriously and said clearly and forcefully, I know a little medical ninjutsu, so don't worry about my injuries. As long as you leave me a thread of life, I'll be fine. Unlike Kakashi-kun, I rarely have the opportunity to fight a ninja like you, and that's why I value this encounter very much. Hatake Tsukumo looked at the serious Kazuki silently. After a long time, he whispered, Kazuki-kun, you have a sincere heart. In that case, if I refuse again, it would be my arrogance. Hatake Tsukumo's aura changed subtly after he finished speaking. His entire presence became incredibly dangerous and sharp. Suddenly, Tsukumo raised his sword, and a series of cutting waves, as tall as several people, erupted from the blade, cutting through the ground at a speed barely visible, closing off all of Kazuki's escape routes. At the same time, Tsukumo himself turned into an afterimage, the edge of his sword holding back a barely perceptible danger, ready to attack Kazuki's vital point at any moment. Tsukumo had begun his attack in earnest. Father. After the battle, Kakashi looked at the charred training ground and asked, confused, did you hold back earlier? Hatake Tsukumo shook his head. On the contrary, I was very serious. The current Kazuki-kun really can't fight me head-on. But with his genjutsu and water release, if he doesn't seek a direct confrontation, controlling him would be really difficult. Kakashi, keep trying. You may have met a genius in your generation, but Dad believes in you. But there was a trace of pity in Hatake Tsukumo's eyes. He didn't believe that Kakashi would surpass Kazuki one day. In every generation of the shinobi world, there will be a gifted shinobi who makes his peers feel extremely desperate and becomes the mountain that everyone cannot climb. And Tsukumo, with his ability to discern the potential in others, had a vague feeling that Kazuki might be one of those shinobi. Kid, what are you thinking about? Why are you so silent? Tobirama crossed his arms, watching Kazuki as he silently healed himself. He shook his head and commented, your talent is already quite impressive. You're not thinking of defeating Hatake Tsukumo at his peak, are you? A ninja of his level has abilities far beyond ordinary jonin and has reached the height of a Kage. After Hatake Tsukumo dealt with Kazuki with all his strength, the terrifying slashing waves continued, and Hatake Tsukumo himself was as fast as lightning, making Kazuki experience unprecedented pressure. However, relying on the high protection of the water release, the dynamic vision, and the genjutsu of the Sharingan, although Kazuki found it difficult to launch an active counterattack against Tsukumo, he was able to defend himself relatively calmly and always keep himself safe. From Tobirama's point of view, reaching this point at Kazuki's age was already a remarkable achievement. But Kazuki remained silent after the battle, looking like he was broken, which made Tobirama a little dissatisfied. Tobirama, are you concerned about me? Kazuki spoke slowly, with a hint of fatigue in his words. I suppose so. You are, after all, a prodigy of Konoha, and as the second Hokage, it is only natural that I should be concerned about you. Tobirama paused, his face doubtful, but in the end he decided to answer that way. Kazuki's expression instantly changed from dull to funny. Then don't worry, Tobirama. I'm just thinking about what to eat tonight. I don't care whether I can defeat Hatake Tsukumo. I care whether he can hurt me. And from what I see, I'm pretty confident. As long as I have the ability to survive and grow, I don't think there will be anyone in the future of the shinobi world who can be my opponent. Tobirama's face darkened. He expected nothing less from the evil Uchiha brat. Not only did he make him worry for nothing, but he also displayed a confidence that was typical of the Uchiha clan. But deep down, Tobirama couldn't deny that Kazuki's words had some truth to them. Apart from ninjas of the level of Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama, who else could defeat Kazuki, the combination of Uchiha Izuna and him when he grows up? And Senju Tobirama didn't know at this moment that Uchiha Madara, whom he feared, also started to explode gold coins like him. Kid, you. Just as Tobirama was about to retort, Asuma appeared from the nearby grass, looking at Kazuki with a mix of admiration, respect, nervousness, and confusion in his gaze. Kazuki, can you talk to me? While Kazuki was practicing with Kakashi and Tsukumo, Asuma was training in the neighboring field, perfecting his clan's fire style to ease his inner turmoil. But soon, he saw a huge fire appear on the training ground next door, burning all over the sky, and he was stunned for a moment. Then, he witnessed Kazuki defeat Kakashi in an instant and then face Tsukumo. He couldn't believe that Kazuki, someone his own age, could could face Sakumo's attacks so calmly and orderly. What disturbed Asuma the most was the strong sense of the will of fire that Kazuki possessed. Kazuki's fire will test paper was vigorously promoted by the ninja school. Asuma himself had wanted to talk to Kazuki for a long time, and under the shock of today, he mustered up the courage to overcome his inner hesitation. Although he and Kazuki had no intersection, he still boldly came over. "Asuma-kun, do you want to talk to me?" "Sure." Kazuki looked at the young rebel Asuma and smiled kindly. Asuma is without a doubt a very particular member of the Hokage line. As the son of the third Hokage, his minimum destiny was to be a Konoha advisor, and with a little effort, he could even become an assistant to the Hokage. But Asuma is not a person who follows the rules. Asuma had even come to question the underlying logic of the will of fire. So, he was a ninja who had tried to betray his class, which was pretty interesting. "Where should we go to talk, Asuma-kun? Right here or find a secluded place?" Kazuki stared at the stunned Asuma and said softly, Please come with me, Kazuki-kun. This is really not a good place to talk." Asuma was indeed stunned. He did not expect Kazuki to agree to his request so readily, and his words were still very gentle. This is the sense of oppression brought by strength. In Asuma's mind, a peer of his age with Kazuki's power should be someone proud and arrogant. He was prepared to beg Kazuki, but he never imagined that everything would be so simple that Kazuki would just accept his request. Asuma took Kazuki to a remote valley outside the Konoha village. Looking at Kazuki's confused eyes, he scratched his head and explained awkwardly, "It's safer here, Kazuki-kun. That old man can use ninjutsu to peek at the people in the village. This is the blind spot I found, and it is also where I usually smoke, so it's safe here. We can say whatever we want." Kazuki laughed in his mind. Is Asuma so filial? It seems that the family relationship of Sarutobi Hiruzen is not harmonious. Senju Tobirama frowned. Kazuki had just told him that Sarutobi Asuma was Sarutobi Hiruzen's youngest son. So what is going on? The son of the Hokage came to find a genius of Uchiha, and he had to come to such a secluded corner. His tone was even more disrespectful to Sarutobi Hiruzen. That monkey doesn't even know how to be a good father. Senju Tobirama shook his head, looking like he was disappointed. "Don't talk about being a good father when you don't even have a partner," Kazuki replied in defense of Hiruzen, before indicating with a look that Asuma could begin with his questions. Asuma took a deep breath and expressed his inner confusion. "Kazuki-kun, can you tell me what the will of fire is? I know you scored very high on the will of fire, but do you really believe in it? And if so, why have you chosen to believe in it? Please give me an answer, Kazuki-kun." Kazuki looked at the extremely serious Sarutobi Asuma, sighed, and did not answer his question directly, but asked, "Asuma-kun, what is the real confusion in your heart?" Kazuki sat down under a rock, motioned Asuma to sit next to him, and looked at the prosperous Konoha village not far away. "Your father is the third Hokage of the current Konohagakure village, and the heir appointed by the second Hokage. You grew up next to him, and you should be immersed in the will of fire. Why do you ask such a question?" Asuma slowly sat down next to Kazuki, and the prosperity he saw in his eyes was so empty in his perspective. "Kazuki, it is precisely because I am the son of the third Hokage that I have doubts about the will of fire." Asuma smiled bitterly, pointed to the Uchiha clan emblem on the corner of Kazuki's clothes, and said self-deprecatingly, "Don't be afraid to make fun of me, Kazuki-kun. If it weren't for your identity as a member of the Uchiha clan, I wouldn't even dare to come and talk to you, even though you are so knowledgeable about the will of fire. If I ask other people about the doubts I just mentioned, my father will know everything I said the next day, and then either scold me severely or beat me up." Kazuki laughed. "You are an honest person, Asuma. You're right, the situation of the Uchiha clan in Konoha is so delicate that, even if I could gain your father's favor, I wouldn't risk telling him this. After all, that could deteriorate the relationship between you two." Asuma nodded awkwardly. Kazuki patted his shoulder, stared at him and said, "It has nothing to do with Uchiha and Konoha. Asuma, I promise you that no one else will know what you said today. I swear on the honor of Uchiha." Hearing this, Asuma suddenly became serious. "Thank you, Kazuki-kun. Swearing on the honor of the family is a very reliable guarantee for a 1,000-year-old shinobi clan like Uchiha." But after hearing this, Senju Tobirama snorted coldly. If it was another Uchiha who said such a thing, he could barely believe it. But if the person who swore was Kazuki, Senju Tobirama felt that the credibility of this was about the same as the strength of his oath on the honor of the Senju clan. In short, it can be said that the bottom line is very flexible. Hey, did I accidentally scold myself? Senju Tobirama was stunned and realized the blind spot. Kazuki, it is because my father is the Hokage, and my brother is the head of the ANBU that I can see and hear many things in this village that others cannot see. Asuma took out a wrinkled cigarette from his pocket, lit it skillfully, took a deep breath, and said vaguely, "Do you know the route? It's a division of the ANBU, controlled by Shimura Danzo, the Hokage's advisor. He had some friends, some were from common families, others from shinobi clans, but all of them were selected by the route." Kazuki nodded. Isn't it a good thing to be selected by the ANBU? Asuma Saratobi exhaled a puff of smoke. Good thing? They disappeared from Konoha from then on. I asked their elders, but their families said they were dead, and their eyes were full of hatred and unwillingness. I don't think that my friends want to join the so-called route. Their dream was to become Hokage. Kazuki was silent and nodded slowly. This is indeed the style of Shimura Danzo, kidnapping the geniuses he values and brainwashing them when they are young to make them tools. Not only civilian shinobi, but even shinobi clans find it difficult to resist Shimura Danzo's demands. Hearing Danzo's name, Tobirama's expression darkened, not quite sure what to think. Not only that, Kazuki-kun, as an Uchiha, you should have heard of wood release, right? As if because of Kazuki's serious oath, Asuma's words became bolder. Orochimaru, Shimura Danzo, and my father once conducted human experiments for Konoha to replicate the wood release of the first Hokage. At the beginning, this project was official and formal. Many members of the Senju clan volunteered to sign up and actively cooperated with this research. Even many civilian shinobi also volunteered to join in. Kazuki waved his hand and said slowly, "Asuma, there is nothing wrong with human experiments. The village and your father also want to strengthen the village's power. It does not violate the will of fire. After all, it is voluntary." Asuma shook his head slowly. Later, this experiment was stopped. I don't know the specific reason, but I heard that the success rate was too low, and many shinobi were killed or injured. Kazuki nodded in understanding. Sacrifice doesn't always bring rewards, Asuma. The power of the first Hokage is so tempting that any Hokage would try to replicate Konoha's past glory. Only this time they were unsuccessful, which means nothing in particular. Asuma sighed heavily. Kazuki-kun, I understand what you said too. But after the experiment was stopped, some of the shinobi with Senju bloodline that I remember disappeared in Konoha inexplicably. Where did they go? Did they go to the route, or did they continue to sacrifice in this secret experiment? I want to know, did those shinobi who disappeared later volunteer? And the blackmail of the route and the secret human experiments are just the tip of the iceberg. Are they all in line with the will of fire? Kazuki narrowed his eyes, patted Asuma on the shoulder, and said slowly, "So, what you are really confused about is, in ninja school, the will of fire you learned is presented as something pure, just without a single blemish. And because of your family and background, you have seen the darkness buried deep in the village, which conflicts with the will of fire learned by most Konoha shinobi, and makes it even more difficult for you to understand what the will of fire is." Asuma nodded vigorously, and Kazuki's summary touched his heart. If you have never seen the light, you can endure the darkness. And Asuma has seen the darkness and has a heartfelt doubt about the light in front of him. As an independent-thinking young man, Asuma had his own ideals, but his background had provided him with a fragmented vision that left him in confusion and pain. "Asuma, give me one." Kazuki did not answer Asuma's question, but asked him for a cigarette. Asuma nodded silently, lit a fire for Kazuki, and relit one for himself. The son of the Hokage and the genius of the Uchiha clan. This strange combination sat on the top of the mountain, watching the hustle and bustle of Konoha, smoking silently. Kazuki and Asuma smoked silently, looking at Konoha in the distance together. Asuma smoked heavily, as if each puff was an attempt to release the anguish he carried inside, while his furrowed eyebrows revealed his concern. On the other hand, Kazuki simply let the cigarette burn away in his hand. Watching Asuma, he couldn't help but think of a famous Uchiha. His name is Uchiha Itachi. But now, he is probably still in Uchiha Mikoto's belly. The 4-year-old Uchiha Itachi was brought to the battlefield by Uchiha Fugaku. Since then, he began to think about the meaning of life and peace. After Uchiha Itachi was asked to be a double agent, He was obsessed with the will of fire and believed that the Uchiha clan was an evil clan. In the end, he wielded the butcher knife against his clansmen, lover, and parents. Simply put, he was a paranoid kid who was brainwashed by the enemy after being stimulated and became a devil who didn't recognize his relatives. Asuma and Uchiha Itachi are very similar to some extent. Although Sarutobi Hiruzen is not as abstract as Uchiha Fugaku, he did not do the corresponding work well, which made the smart and careful Asuma smell the dark side of the village from various clues and question his origin. In the end, a shinobi trained since childhood only knows how to kill. His natural mission is to be a sword. If a paranoid sword starts to think, it is hard to say whether it will cut the enemy or the friendly forces. After all, what correct things can a sword think of? In the shinobi world, there are only a handful of shinobi with normal brains. Not only the Uchiha clan, but most shinobi are paranoid and terrible. As for Uchiha Itachi, he came into contact with Sarutobi Hiruzen and Shimura Danzo in his childhood and betrayed the Uchiha clan. Asuma was well protected because of his identity as the son of the Hokage, but he just wandered and wasted his youth. But now it is different. Asuma found Kazuki. Kazuki can be a sharp knife, and can also be the one holding the knife. Asuma, since you are so distrustful of the will of fire and have doubts about the village, why did you find me? Kazuki stared at the Hokage rock in the distance, looked at Senju Tobirama on it, and said slowly, "If you think I'm someone dedicated to the will of fire, shouldn't you stay away from me?" Asuma shook his head, and a look of reminiscence appeared in his eyes. "I don't think the will of fire is bad. I just think that the people who interpret the will of fire now are too hypocritical. What they say and what they do are completely different." "Kazuki, can I call you that?" After receiving Kazuki's affirmation, Asuma seemed to be in a better mood, and then said, "In my eyes, you are the true practitioner of the will of fire. You are strong, humble, and always willing to help others. Even as an Uchiha, your existence and your stories inspire many of our peers. Especially when I saw you helping Inada Kojiro that day, I couldn't help but want to talk to you. You didn't continue to encourage him to become a ninja, but helped him open a shop he liked. What I saw in his eyes was a smile from the heart. However, if I or any other teacher were to try to help him, the first thing we would think of would be how to help him become a better ninja. From that moment, I knew you were special, Kazuki." Asuma turned his head, looked at Kazuki seriously, and said in a deep voice, "So, I came to find you." Kazuki nodded in understanding and asked a question. "Asuma, do you think it is worth sacrificing the happiness of some people in Konoha in exchange for the happiness of others? Just like your friends who joined the route, some of them may want to walk in the light, and some may just want to open a small shop like Inada Kojiro, but they all entered the route. They sacrificed their lives, but in exchange, Konoha increased its defensive strength." Asuma narrowed his eyes, and after a moment, he shook his head vigorously. "My friends didn't do it willingly. Even though Konoha has become stronger, that strength isn't right, and I don't think it can last. The first Hokage said that Konoha was founded so that people could unite and resist invasion from other shinobi villages. But what Shimura Danzo does, attacking our own people first under the pretext of fighting other villages, is something I can never accept." Saying this, Asuma clenched his fists tightly, and his voice echoed like a suppressed roar. Kazuki smiled and said slowly, "If this is the case, Asuma, then let me ask you another question. Suppose that the Third Shinobi World War broke out and Konoha fell into a disadvantage, and at this time, the enemy hidden village proposed that if Konoha handed over a few not-so-strong shinobi, a peace agreement could be reached. If you were the Hokage, would you agree?" Asuma was about to say something, but Kazuki gestured for him to wait and added more details. "If the war continues, Konoha will have hundreds of shinobi die, and if they agree, the enemy will cease fire for at least 10 years, ushering in a relatively long period of peace. Think about this carefully and tell me, what would you decide?" Asuma obviously hesitated and thought about it. Senju Tobirama narrowed his eyes, and compared to the hesitant Asuma, his answer was much more straightforward. "Boring question. If any Konoha high-level will hand over the shinobi in the village because of the armistice agreement, I will kill him first. Monkey Danzo, even if they make some small mistakes, they can't be so stupid. This is not a question of how many Konoha shinobi died. This is the integrity and will of a village. If we don't even have the determination to fight for our comrades, then Konoha doesn't deserve to exist anymore." Kazuki looked at Senju Tobirama with interest and asked with a smile, "What if the same problem happened during the First Shinobi World War, and the hostage the enemy proposed to exchange was Uchiha?" Kid, who do you think I am? Senju Tobirama sneered disdainfully. It is true that I discriminate against the Uchiha clan, because I will monitor every factor of unrest inside and outside the village. But that doesn't mean I'm going to resolve the village's internal conflicts by handing them over to external enemies. If I do that, I am not worthy of being the second Hokage. Kazuki applauded Senju Tobirama and whispered, I believe you, Tobirama. And at this time, Asuma, still struggling with the difficult question posed by Kazuki, finally made a decision as if he were truly the Hokage, and declared firmly, word for word, Kazuki, I will not hand over Konoha shinobi, even if they are genin. Very good, Asuma. Kazuki laughed from the bottom of his heart, full of appreciation. Like you, I think so too. So, what do you think the current Konoha high-level officials will do when faced with the situation I mentioned? Kazuki did not intend to answer Asuma's question from the beginning, but adopted the method of asking questions, guiding Asuma's thinking step by step with questions, and let him answer the answer himself. In this way, the conclusion Asuma reached would be a product of his own reflection, and not something imposed by Kazuki, which would cause said conclusion to be deeply engraved in his mind. I don't know. Asuma frowned, a shadow of fear in his gaze. Would the high-ranking officials of Konoha really reject the sacrifice of some shinobi to achieve a peace agreement, as Kazuki had suggested? Asuma actually had the answer in his heart, but his origin as the son of Hokage, combined with that outrageous answer, gave him too much impact. That kind of village is completely different from what Asuma thought Konoha should be like. Forget about the will of fire. If that were the case, Konoha would simply become a hell that eats people. The will of fire hat can be casually put on a Konoha shinobi's head, and he would die. Kazuki watched Asuma's anguish carefully, but with his words he reassured him. I don't know the answer to this question, Asuma. Things that haven't happened, even if there are speculations, can't be determined. But if you already have fear in your heart, it means that you are not satisfied with the current situation of Konoha. In this shinobi world, if you want to change something, having a correct thought is secondary. What really matters is having the power to make those parasites not dare to speak. Kazuki tugged at Asuma's sleeve, looked at the burn marks on it, and said, Are you practicing fire attribute chakra changes? Asuma nodded awkwardly. Kazuki, that's right. The Sarutobi clan is expert in fire release ninjutsu. Kazuki nodded in understanding, and then raised a finger. A small red flame emerged from the tip of Kazuki's finger, twisting and dancing freely in the air. Asuma watched the flame, fascinated. He recognized what he saw. It was an advanced form of fire-type chakra transformation. Kazuki, you are not only so proficient in water attribute chakra, but also in fire attribute chakra. Asuma looked at Kazuki with admiration, and then thought of Kazuki's origin, scratched his head. I forgot that you are from the Uchiha clan, Kazuki. Kazuki smiled and shook his head, wiggling his fingers. Suddenly, more flames appeared in the air, and those small lively sparks began to gather together. Asuma stared at this scene blankly. In an instant, the small flames merged into a robust fire dragon, which roared in the air. The fire dragon seemed to have a life of its own, circling majestically above Kazuki's head. Asuma, I am very grateful that you shared your thoughts with me today. Under the imposing presence of the fire dragon, Kazuki's face did not show any severity. Rather, the glow of the fire made him look even gentler. It is really difficult to find a like-minded person in this somewhat depressing village. But as I said, if you want to make the village better, you need strength to support it. Asuma, if you believe me, relax your mind. I will use these eyes to help you stimulate your potential. Kazuki generously showed his Sharingan, but instead of being the usual intimidating crimson pupil, under the glow of the fire, his eyes seemed warm. Asuma stared at Kazuki's eyes and murmured, This is the Sharingan, but it's nothing like what I was told. After a while, Asuma felt Kazuki's warm pupil power and nodded vigorously. Thank you, Kazuki. The tomo was spinning violently. In the genjutsu, Asuma seemed to have become Kazuki, and personally lit up the flames, watching them gradually grow, and gather together to become a fire dragon that illuminates the world and dispels darkness. Asuma was immersed in this feeling. The light and darkness of the fire dragon gave him a strong sense of déjà vu, as if he himself was the growing flame. After a long time, Asuma slowly opened his eyes. Kazuki stood in front of him with a smile, and the fire dragon was hovering in his palm. Asuma, catch him. Asuma subconsciously stretched out his hand and saw the violent fire dragon attacking his palm. He was suddenly startled and heard Kazuki's encouraging words. "Believe in yourself, you can do it." At that moment, the feeling left behind in the world of genjutsu began to resurface in Asuma's memory. Asuma gritted his teeth and boldly stretched out his hand. And at that instant, Kazuki's fingers also moved subtly, controlling the intensity of the chakra. "Kazuki, I did it, I did it." Asuma looked at the fire dragon in his hand with ecstasy. Although his mind sometimes focused on the village and the will of fire, in the end, he was still an 8-year-old boy. Being able to master powerful techniques made Asuma feel extremely surprised, and his favor for Kazuki reached the peak. Kazuki watched with a smile as Asuma jumped for joy and put his hands together to dispel the fire dragon. "Asuma, many things are difficult and seem impossible to complete, but since we want to change the status quo, we must at least have the courage to try." Kazuki looked straight at Asuma and said slowly, "Just like the village now, you and I are just ordinary ninja school students. How difficult is it to make the village what we want? But some things can't be ignored just because they are difficult." Asuma's expression became solemn and nodded seriously. "Kazuki, I understand. To be honest, I even wanted to become a wandering ninja. Escaping this is a situation that I cannot stand and cannot change. But with you here, Kazuki, I think I already have enough courage." Kazuki shook his head. "Asuma, I'm also just a clumsy seeker. I'm also very confused. Many things I have judged are not accurate. Asuma, I consider you a friend, and I want to tell you not to take my words as if they were the absolute truth. But you should think more, Asuma. Observe more, reflect more, look for what you consider correct." Asuma was stunned. Kazuki's honest self-assessment, combined with his sincere advice, caused a warm feeling and a slight bitter feeling to arise in Asuma's heart. There was no one else like Kazuki in the entire village. Kazuki smiled and stretched out his hand to him. "Let's work hard together, Asuma." Asuma shook it without hesitation. "Let's do it together, Kazuki." Sarutobi Asuma's intense admiration towards the host has been detected. New linked target. And when Asuma's emotions fluctuated, Uchiha Madara in the mountain's graveyard, Senju Tobirama in Kazuki's body, also felt their hearts shaken. As Madara recalled the fire dragon that Kazuki had shown, his expression was a mix of excitement and seriousness. This technique and method of using fire release chakra. Uchiha Madara's mind flashed with the figure of his younger brother, and he shook his head and smiled. To say he's like Izuna would be a mistake. He's actually more like me. But it doesn't matter, after all, I was the one who taught Izuna fire release. But this way of using them, I'm not wrong. There's no way anyone can develop my fire release technique on their own. If before, the similarity between Kazuki and Izuna had left Madara doubtful and confused. But after seeing Kazuki use fire release, Madara was sure, he and Kazuki shared a deep bond, an undeniable bond. Kazuki's fire release technique is unique to Uchiha Madara. Combined with Kazuki's Kenjutsu and Muramesa's fluid use, Madara became more and more excited. He let out a long sigh and muttered to himself, "No wonder my younger brother. The legend of chakra reincarnation. Could it be true?" In the 1,000-year-long struggle between the Senju and Uchiha clans, every generation, a talented ninja will appear in both clans and become the clan leader of the two clans. And each generation of gifted clan leaders has many similarities in character and ability, and they are all scripts of love and hate each other. This made the clan members of both Senju and Uchiha have a bold guess. Could it be that the ancient leaders did not resolve their battle and, enraged, decided to reincarnate? This idea had always circulated between both clans, capturing everyone's attention and imagination. Before meeting Kazuki, Madara used to despise these theories, even suppressing them. What chakra reincarnation? What nonsense! I, Uchiha Madara, am myself, and I can never be the reincarnation of someone else. But after seeing Kazuki's performance, Madara began to think, hey, what if there's some truth to it? It's not just the fire release technique. That ability to win people over with his words. How could a 12-year-old child be so cunning, if he wasn't the reincarnation of Izuna? Uchiha Madara recalled the conversation between Kazuki and Asuma and recalled the scene when he just became the head of the clan. At that time, Madara was young and impetuous. Although he was strong, his power had not yet reached its peak and he needed the support of his clan. At that time Izuna, like Kazuki, used gentle words and relentless strength on behalf of Madara to win the hearts of the entire Uchiha clan. Madara exhaled deeply, his eyes showing restrained emotion, but also some concern. The excitement, of course, came from the certainty that Kazuki was the reincarnation of Izuna, and being able to see his brother again was the best thing that could have happened to him. The concern, however, arose from Madara's deep knowledge of Izuna. Although Kazuki may be the reincarnation of Izuna, he was also Shirsue's older brother, and had his own ideas. In terms of identity and ideas, Kazuki and Izuna are two completely different people. Madara didn't believe that someone as cunning as Izuna would trust him just because of a couple of words. If that were the case, Madara would doubt that Kazuki was truly Izuna's reincarnation. The human mind can be really complicated. In order for Kazuki to recognize me and join me, what kind of plan should I set up? If I treat him like that idiot Obito, Kazuki, with his skill and maturity, will easily find out. That would be disastrous. Madara pondered, his brow furrowing, but his smile growing wider as well. It's an interesting challenge. Madara's heart, which had not been excited in a long time, began to beat rapidly again. Madara's gaze fell on his aged arm, and his brow furrowed visibly. To appear before Kazuki in this sorry state. He couldn't accept that. Must find a way to change, and to ensure at least the continuity of the Eye of the Moon plan. Madara suppressed his desire to see Kazuki and began slowly making seals. Black Zetsu, I'm talking to you. The plan must move forward quickly. Take control of Uchiha Obito and then come report to me. Besides, you have another task. I understand, Madara-sama. Black Zetsu replied respectfully. Black Zetsu shook his head. Although this generation of Indra has awakened the Rinnegan, it is truly worrying. This spokesperson's plan, if it weren't for me cleaning up the mess, would be full of loopholes. I'm really destined to work hard. Forget it, these are all small problems in order to revive my mother. Black Zetsu stood in the corner, silently observing Uchiha Obito, who was sweating profusely, and a sick smile appeared on his face. What Uchiha Obito needs is the feeling of being cared for, so I will satisfy him. Since ancient times, heroes have been unable to resist beauties. Compared to heroes saving beauties, beauties saving heroes is the kind of drama that no one can resist. Especially, the sentimental Uchiha clan. Black Zetsu slowly sank into the ground, and a big drama against Uchiha Obito was being prepared. Kazuki smiled and looked at Asuma's departing back, feeling very relieved. Before leaving, Asuma said to Kazuki, Kazuki, I have always hated using privileges to do things in the village, but now please forgive me, for the future of the village, I have to do this. After I go back, I will beg my father to let you and I be in the same class after graduation, and please agree. I know that you like medical ninjutsu, Kazuki. I will find a way to let my father let Tsunade-sama guide us. Kazuki readily agreed. With Asuma's support, it would be easy to achieve. Asuma would need a teacher from the Hokage line, and Sarutobi Hiruzen would surely assign him the best. Especially since Asuma, being so considerate, had chosen Tsunade. Compared to Jiraiya, who was somewhat unpredictable, and Orochimaru, who seemed to have gone dark, Tsunade, who is beautiful and easy to use, is Kazuki's best choice. Come on, Asuma, I believe you will succeed. Kazuki chuckled. At this moment, Senju Tobirama slowly exhaled a long breath. As the son of the Hokage, Asuma's criticism and resentment of the village made him what made Senju Tobirama feel even worse was what Kazuki said. Asuma, think more. It's best for a ninja kid of this age not to think too much. Thinking too much will cause problems. Kazuki kid, tell me what you want the monkey's son to understand. What are you talking about, Tobirama? Kazuki stood on the top of the mountain with a smile, breathing the clear and refreshing air in the sky, looking at the Hokage rock in the distance. Didn't you understand what I said to him? I have told Asuma not to blindly follow my words. I am just an ordinary student of the ninja school. Let Asuma learn to see with his own eyes and think with his heart. Is there any problem with this? Do you want to see me, an Uchiha, teach the son of the Hokage how to be a Konoha ninja? Kazuki laughed playfully, and Senju Tobirama was silent. What Kazuki said was true, and what's more, it was exactly what he had done. Since the conversation began, Kazuki kept asking questions that forced Asuma to reflect for himself, allowing him to answer his own doubts. Asuma's answers are the results of his own thinking. But if Kazuki had manipulated Asuma into developing prejudices against Sarutobi Hiruzen and Konoha, Tobirama probably wouldn't be so uneasy. Tricks and conspiracies always end up being discovered. But the upright conspiracy has unparalleled power, and Asuma, who is so-called independent thinking, has already developed an attitude of full trust in Kazuki. Even Asuma directly began to use his identity and resources to help Kazuki imperceptibly. In Konoha, where many yearn to be part of the Hokage's inner circle, and where the Uchiha clan has yearned for years to gain access to the top ranks, Kazuki got it so easily. He didn't even take the initiative to do anything, but just bloomed his own will of fire, and the son of the Hokage took the initiative to find him, and he still needed a shy and pleading tone to make Kazuki agree to be his companion. With such a result, no one could see that Kazuki had a problem, not even Sarutobi Hiruzen, who had been in charge of Konoha for many years. Because Asuma wanted to do it from the bottom of his heart and was willing to do it. Senju Tobirama took a deep breath. He didn't know whether it was because of Kazuki's extraordinary charm or the darkness of Konoha revealed by Asuma, but he felt very complicated. Following Kazuki's sight, Senju Tobirama saw his statue on the Hokage rock, and the scenery in his eyes became hazy. When he first took charge of Konoha, he also conquered various shinobi clans in this way. By showing the will of fire in a practical way, even the Uchiha clan was more happy than worried about Uchiha Kagami becoming his disciple. Is this a repeating cycle? While he was thinking, Kazuki's voice rang out slowly. Tobirama, don't be so anxious. I have never lied to you. I have told you that my purpose is very simple, to make good people have a better life, to let those who make mistakes get the punishment they deserve, and to make the village and the shinobi world better. You have seen my actions with your own eyes, so I only ask you one thing. Is my will of fire still compatible with your standards? Senju Tobirama snorted coldly, and the words of rebuttal came to his lips, but he didn't know how to say it. He felt something was wrong, but even he didn't know what was wrong, and he couldn't say what was wrong. But if so, doesn't it mean that Kazuki is right? Impossible. The evil Uchiha kid must have a problem. Kazuki kid, I will keep an eye on you. Imprisoning me in your body is the biggest mistake you have ever made. I will see your true face clearly. Kazuki laughed. Tobirama, then may I take it that you are now comfortable being sealed within my body? Kazuki's eyes showed a strange expression as he took a step back without it being too noticeable. I feel that it is better for us to have a sense of distance. You have disturbed my life a little. I began to doubt your motives. Senju Tobirama twitched his mouth. After Kazuki said this, he felt that there seemed to be something wrong. Little boy, don't be so slick. What you said to Asuma is nothing more than you magnifying the darkness of the village. Senju Tobirama forcefully changed the topic, tightened his face and said in a deep voice, Do you remember our bet? You said that within 2 years, the will of fire will burn innocent people. If you lose, you must agree to one of my requests. I'll tell you now, my request is that you are not allowed to do anything that harms the interests of Konoha. Tobirama spoke gravely, but his gaze seemed somewhat hesitant. Kazuki, who is so similar to him, probably has a similarly flexible moral bottom line. The oath of a shinobi is almost the same as toilet paper. But to the surprise of Senju Tobirama, Kazuki nodded slowly and answered seriously, I will not break my promise to you, Tobirama. Like you said, even if it is a Uchiha shinobi, you will not hand it over to the enemy as a bargaining chip for a truce agreement. It's the same for me. I am a ninja of Konoha. The interests of Konoha are my interests. Why would I damage it? After saying this, Kazuki muttered in his mind, Konoha's future is mine. There is no point in harming what is mine. I am not a senile old man like you. Senju Tobirama stared at Kazuki's honest eyes and nodded silently. By the way, Tobirama, I want to ask you a question. Kazuki smiled and patted his shoulder. If the day comes when Konoha needs it, would you be willing to lend me your strength? Senju Tobirama was stunned and narrowed his eyes. If it's for Konoha, yes. Only, Tobirama had no idea how he could lend his strength to Kazuki. This brat seems to be coveting my wisdom. At least he has good taste. Hearing Senju Tobirama's affirmative answer, Kazuki smiled and nodded. If that's the case, relax, Tobirama. Even if you lose the bet, I won't force you to kneel on the ground. It would really hurt me to see you like this. You have been, and in some ways still are, my idol. From the target Senju Tobirama, you get the ninjutsu, mutually multiplying explosive tags. You brat, I believe in Konoha and my students. I don't need your leniency. Tobirama waved his hand dismissively, showing a gesture of disdain towards Kazuki's words, but the tone of the electronic reward revealed that he was, in a way, pleased. A few days later, in the dark of the village, Shimura Danzo, a student trusted by Senju Tobirama, who was known as the Darkness of the Shinobi, was checking the information about Kazuki at the root, with a cruel and satisfied smile on his lips. I already have the wood release. If I also get the Sharingan, there is no one else who should be Hokage but me. And in the most dazzling place of the village, inside the Hokage residence, the rebellious Asuma knelt in front of the astonished Sarutobi Hiruzen, his eyes full of regret and pleading. One in the shadows and one in the light, the two central characters of Konoha. Both, at that moment, had begun to hatch plans in their minds due to Kazuki's existence. Hokage residence. Sarutobi Hiruzen took off the Hokage hat with emotion, waved his hand, and intimately asked Kazuki to sit on the chair opposite. I've really been a big trouble for you. Having you worry about my family's affairs makes me feel a little ashamed. Come, sit down, Kazuki. Let me take a good look at Kagami's descendant, the future of the village. Kazuki gave Sarutobi Hiruzen a sunny smile and sat down without hesitation, as if he was very familiar with him. Although, this was only the first time Kazuki and Sarutobi Hiruzen met. After Asuma's surprising gesture of kneeling before him, a shocked Hiruzen then listened to his son, who in an act of sincerity, criticized himself for his previous behavior and expressed his deep admiration for Kazuki, wishing for him to be his teammate. This left Hiruzen pleasantly surprised. His troublesome son had finally matured. However, his experience as a leader made him sense something else in the situation. Therefore, although he had planned to observe Kazuki for a while longer, urged by Asuma, he decided to look for him earlier than planned and talk to him as a father and as Hokage. Kazuki was very sensitive to Sarutobi Hiruzen's heart, and did not wait for him to lay the groundwork. When they met, he directly told the Hokage father the general content of his conversation with Asuma. Until now, the words spoken by Kazuki and Asuma have perfectly matched, and Sarutobi Hiruzen's heart has gradually settled down. But this is not enough. The Hokage of Konoha still has to make a final test of Kazuki. Hokage-sama, I don't think there is any trouble with Asuma. On the contrary, I enjoy being with him. He is a passionate, sunny, and talented ninja. Kazuki took the tea handed over by Sarutobi Hiruzen with a smile, thanked him, and said slowly, "What surprised me most is that although he and I are just students of the ninja school, Asuma has a macro perspective on the village and the shinobi world. He said many ideas that touched me deeply and made me admire his magnanimity." Sarutobi Hiruzen listened carefully, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Magnanimity. What did Asuma say to Kazuki? To what depth did Asuma's thinking reach? Sarutobi Hiruzen's curiosity and vigilance were aroused, and he shook his head with a wry smile. Alas, I've been so busy with government affairs that I've neglected Asuma's upbringing and care. He's never mentioned any of this to me. Kazuki's face hesitated, as if he had something to hide, and his brows frowned. After a moment, Kazuki looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen seriously and said in a deep voice, "Hokage-sama, this is something I shouldn't mention, as it concerns a family matter and also involves another high-ranking Konoha official. I am just a student of the ninja school. I am not qualified to comment on these things, but as a friend of Asuma, if you allowed me, I would like to talk to you as his father in this capacity." Hiruzen looked at Kazuki, noticing the sincerity in his clear eyes, as well as a hint of embarrassment for his friend. "Kazuki, your grandfather Uchiha Kagami and I were life and death companions, and you are a friend of my youngest son Asuma. In private, you can just call me Uncle Hiruzen. No need to call me by my title. We should be a family." Sarutobi Hiruzen smiled and touched his beard. "You make me feel a little younger. I don't have any gray hairs in my beard yet." Kazuki nodded heavily and said, "I know, Uncle Hiruzen. The reason Asuma didn't understand some of your decisions had to do with a secret organization in the village called the Root, led by Shimura Danzo, his advisor." When the name of Shimura Danzo was mentioned and entangled with Asuma, Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes became serious. "Shimura Danzo, is he still reaching out his black hand to his son? This is unbearable." Asuma inevitably came into contact with some intelligence. When he accidentally noticed the Root, he discovered a shocking dark plot after paying attention to it day by day. He doesn't understand why the Root did illegal operations but was not punished, and Shimura Danzo and you are good friends. Asuma thinks that it is because of your protection, Uncle Hiruzen, that the Root is so reckless. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked very strange, with worry mixed with relaxation, and his eyes kept signaling Kazuki to continue. Kazuki said bluntly, "Asuma focuses on the experiment of developing wood release." Hiruzen narrowed his eyes slightly. He was not surprised that Kazuki knew about this matter. But Asuma, why would he still pay attention to this experiment that was cancelled? Kazuki seemed not to notice the change in Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes and continued. Asuma found that after the village stopped the experiment, some shinobi with Senju blood disappeared in Konoha and never appeared again. Even some children with Senju blood disappeared inexplicably. Such a vicious incident. Asuma believes that the root cannot do this without your affirmation. At this point, Kazuki sighed helplessly. I have told Asuma that as the Hokage, you are in charge of the affairs of the entire village, dozens of shinobi clans, and tens of thousands of shinobi. It is impossible to grasp all the changes in the village. And the root is a powerful organization within ANBU. If they focus on hiding the truth from you, they might succeed, at least for a while. Kazuki turned his gaze to the Hokage hat on the table and said in a tone that mixed admiration and resignation. Uncle Hiruzen, Asuma admires you very much, but he admires you to the extent that he hopes you can do everything and manage the village without a trace of dirt. So when Asuma saw that the darkness had not been dealt with, he, who admired his father so much, would not think about whether there was a problem with the root, but thought that you should have dealt with it long ago. Hiruzen's expression became more and more shocked, and it was even clear that he was pleased with what he heard. He unconsciously took out his pipe, searching for the lighter on the table. Kazuki stood up nimbly, lighting a flame on his finger and bringing it closer to the pipe. Sarutobi Hiruzen patted Kazuki's shoulder, took a deep breath, and exhaled a thick puff of smoke. Kazuki, I don't know how to thank you. I have to admit that Asuma is right. This matter was my negligence, which led to his disappointment. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed. As a Hokage and a father, I have made mistakes, and I need to reflect on it. Fortunately, with your existence, Kazuki, I learned about these problems in time. I will make an explanation that will satisfy both of you and the village. Sarutobi Hiruzen smiled happily in his mind. Asuma, who was thought to be simply rebellious, actually got into a quarrel because he worshipped his father too much. As for whether this is reasonable, in Sarutobi Hiruzen's opinion, this is too reasonable. The key is that it sounds quite comfortable and useful. Kazuki's performance made Sarutobi Hiruzen very satisfied. As a Hokage, what he needs is someone who tells him the truth, whether it is Uchiha or Inoshikacho. Loyalty that is not absolute is absolutely disloyal. At present, Kazuki's loyalty is extremely rare in the Uchiha clan and even in Konoha. Hiruzen recalled Kazuki's exam and became increasingly convinced that the young man in front of him was a shinobi who united thought and action. The will of fire must be burning in Kazuki's chest. Kazuki, don't worry, Uncle Hiruzen, as the Hokage, will definitely give an explanation to Asuma, you and the entire village. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked very serious and said solemnly, in Konoha, no matter who it is, even if the Hokage assistant makes a mistake, he needs to accept the village's severe punishment. The will of fire is something that every shinobi in Konoha must abide by, and Shimura Danzo is no exception. Kazuki nodded in agreement, but inside Kazuki's body, Tobirama frowned, disapproving of the Hokage's words. Although Sarutobi Hiruzen couldn't hear him, he still cursed. With your level, you were tricked by Kazuki to the point that you couldn't even hold your pipe, and you gave me a 0 on the test of the will of fire. I remember, monkey. When I can see you, you will explain to me how you manage Konoha. Kazuki listened to Sarutobi Hiruzen's speech with a smile on his face, while attacking the very indignant Senju Tobirama. Tobirama, sometimes the dead are more useful than the living. But at present, you, the dead Hokage, are really not as useful as the living one. Look, Sarutobi Hiruzen doesn't care about you when you curse him. You should learn more from him. Keep complaining, but I need to hear from the third Hokage. You're a stubborn old man who refuses to change. Tobirama's face darkened. Even though he knew that Kazuki was just trying to provoke him, he couldn't help but feel irritated. If conditions permit, he would like to rush out and teach Sarutobi Hiruzen a lesson. From the target Senju Tobirama, you have obtained the Earth Release, Underground Projection Fish Technique. There is one more thing I want to report to Uncle Hiruzen. After Hiruzen finished reprimanding Danzo and talking about the will of fire, Kazuki, who had let his words go in one ear and out the other, spoke slowly. Asuma taught me some fire release ninjutsu from the Sarutobi clan. As a thank you, I shared with him some of the Uchiha clan's techniques in using the fire release. However, to help him understand them quickly, I used the Sharingan to induce a genjutsu. This is part of a development technique I'm exploring with the Sharingan. I use Genjutsu to give shinobi the feeling of performing high-level ninjutsu, which can help in acquiring new techniques. Perhaps it could be useful in teaching at the ninja school. Also, I have some concern. I'm worried that if someone finds out that I used a Genjutsu to exchange techniques in handling the fire release with Asuma, they might try to sow discord. Like Asuma, I don't trust some people in the village. I only trust Uncle Hiruzen. After all, I am an Uchiha. After finishing speaking, Kazuki showed his Sharingan, which radiated an unusual warmth, and sighed. Sarutobi Hiruzen stared at the special pair of Sharingan and laughed. How could he not know? When Sarutobi Hiruzen used the telescope technique and saw Kazuki teaching Noera Rin the mystical palm technique, he understood what was going on. The key point is that Kazuki showed him the Sharingan and confessed that he used Genjutsu on Asuma. This is very important. No matter how the Genjutsu is used and whether the intention is good or not, it is very sensitive to use Genjutsu on the son of the Hokage. But when Kazuki took the initiative to say it, the nature of the matter changed completely. Below the level of Mangekyo, Sarutobi Hiruzen is not afraid of the Genjutsu of the Sharingan. They were in Konoha, not in some remote corner like Kirigakure, where there wasn't even detection ninjutsu. Here there was the Byakugan of the Hyuga clan, the sensory abilities of the Yamanaka and Uzumaki clans, and the intelligence of the Nara clan. No one could secretly control Konoha's top brass, not even the Hokage's son. You kid, you think too much. Hiruzen smiled warmly, though his tone held a slight reproach. Don't worry, Kazuki. I have complete trust in you. You are an excellent Konoha shinobi, with the strongest will of fire I have ever seen. Don't worry about your Uchiha origin. The Uchiha clan is also an important part of Konoha. In his time, my sensei, the second Hokage, trusted Kagami completely, even in difficult situations, and considered him a valuable disciple. I may not be as great as Tobirama, but I definitely have the ability to accept someone like you, Kazuki. Hearing this, Kazuki breathed a long sigh of relief, and despite Tobirama's screams, he couldn't help but laugh heartily. Monkey, you have a shitty capacity. You really made me lose face in front of this kid. Sarutobi Hiruzen couldn't be more pleased with Kazuki. He coughed lightly and said quietly, Kazuki, the following is a request I make to you as your friend's father. I know that team assignment is a crucial step in a shinobi's career. It's the beginning of bonding, something extremely important. You may already have in mind the partners you'd like to be with. But I am not only a Hokage, as Asuma's father, I have to say that I have some selfish motives. When the class division comes, I will put you and Asuma in the same class and find a good teacher for you. Kazuki smiled. So this was a little show of favoritism from the Hokage? Thank you, Uncle Hiruzen. I would also very much like to be Asuma's teammate and grow together as pillars of Konoha. Sarutobi Hiruzen laughed happily. In his mind, he is already a Hokage who can subdue Uchiha, just like Senju Tobirama. Looking at the portrait of Senju Tobirama hanging on the wall, Sarutobi Hiruzen thought to himself, Sensei, I'm doing my best to follow in your footsteps and become a good Hokage. Please support me from wherever you are. When Kazuki left, Sarutobi Hiruzen also mentioned to Kazuki that if a certain shinobi really troubled him, don't worry, Konoha's Iron Fist will support the righteous Kazuki. And just a few nights later, Kazuki, who was going home from shopping, passed an intersection. A strange man with bandages all over his body and crutches appeared in front of Kazuki. The person who came was Shimura Danzo. Lately, Danzo had been feeling incredibly satisfied. The human experiment he secretly conducted alongside Orochimaru had been a success. The baby who survived was named Kino, and although he was only a few years old, he had already awakened would release. According to the information he obtained from Kino, Orochimaru had injected Danzo with a small amount of Hashirama's cells. While this did not allow him to master wood release, it did help him better control his right eye with the 3-Tomo Sharingan. So far, Shimura Danzo believes that he has mastered the original power of Konoha. The combination of Uchiha and Senju power would secure him the title of Hokage. Full of confidence, after eliminating the obstacles he considered on his way to the title of 4th Hokage, he only saw one ninja as a true threat, Hatake Tsukumo, who distinguished himself in the Second Great Shinobi War. The others, like Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, were nothing more than defeated warriors in Amige-Cure, nothing to fear. Although they were known as the Sannin, compared to him, a veteran of Konoha and a born leader, they still lacked a lot. Recently, Danzo had heard about Kazuki's growing fame, which sparked deep interest in him. Shimura Danzo needs more Sharingan, and if he can deceive a talented Uchiha as his loyal dog, then the 3-Tomo Sharingan, wouldn't it be inexhaustible? Orochimaru has told him that if he wants to obtain the power of wood release, he must inject more Hashirama cells, and if he wants to carry more Hashirama cells, he needs more 3-Tomo Sharingan. Moreover, if Shimura Danzo wants to ascend to the position of Hokage, if Kazuki can subdue the Uchiha clan as his assistant, then the chances of success will greatly increase. With all these reasons in mind, Danzo decided to recruit Kazuki. This time, Danzo had prepared an irrefutable speech and offer. Uchiha Kazuki, I like you. Danzo, his right eye covered by bandages and leaning on a cane, stood in the middle of the street. His presence was grim and oppressive as he addressed Kazuki, who was approaching. Your will of fire cannot flourish under the light of the village. Only with me will you be able to achieve your ambitions and guide the Uchiha clan on the right path. Kazuki slowly stopped. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the leader of Konoha's route. Did this supposed Hokage advisor believe his fame preceded him? Why the hell didn't he show up? After all, I'm just a student at the ninja school. It's illogical for me to recognize a leader of a secret division, right? So Kazuki looked at Shimura Danzo, who looked confident and seemed to be waiting for him to bow down, and said slowly, "Who are you?" For a moment, the atmosphere of the scene became weird. Senju Tobirama sighed. He had already witnessed the humiliations of the Hokage's son and the third Hokage himself, which had tested the second Hokage's patience to the limit. Seeing the appearance of his beloved disciple Shimura Danzo, Senju Tobirama's eyes showed a trace of despair. With a cane and blindfolds. Who wouldn't think you were a strange pervert? Although Tobirama thought Hiruzen was a fool. But Sarutobi Hiruzen, who is in his prime, looks very decent, serious, powerful and gentle. But what is Shimura Danzo doing with this look? Tobirama was silent. I am. After a long moment of tense silence between Kazuki and Danzo, it was finally Danzo who couldn't help but speak first. I am Shimura Danzo, advisor to the Hokage and leader of the Konoha route. What I say is the will of Konoha. Really? I don't believe it. Kazuki gave a sarcastic smile, his eyes shamelessly scanning Danzo. Uncle, your appearance makes it hard for me to believe you. Don't you think that if an ordinary villager meets you at night, he will be at least scared to death? Assistant Hokage, I have heard of this position. But I don't know who the Assistant Hokage is, and I don't know who Shimura Danzo is. Especially I don't believe that the village's top leaders will be like rats, and will come to a student of the ninja school so secretly at night. So, are you a spy from another village, or a weirdo who likes to play pranks? Kazuki's expression became alert, and his eyes became dangerous. Danzo's face twisted. Kazuki's words had struck him to the core. Although normally no one dared to tell him that, deep down, Danzo knew it was true. Except for the Jonin of Konoha, most of the common Chunin and Genin only knew his name, but did not know what he looked like. There was nothing he could do about it. Who told him to hide in the root base most of the time, or to carry out secret missions? The root doesn't show its face. Evil Uchiha kid, although the words are unpleasant, I really have to pay attention to my personal image, and I should find a way to let these ninja school children know my existence. Danzo muttered in his mind and threw a certificate to Kazuki. On the certificate, there is a special identification method of Konoha, which proves his identity. Little brat, don't waste the opportunity one gave you. Shimura Danzo snorted coldly and said arrogantly, I will work hard to train you and accept you as my disciple. After that, Shimura Danzo raised his head and waited for Kazuki's response. This is the ultimate move he came up with. With his position as assistant to the Hokage, wouldn't it be easy to win over this Uchiha with a strong will of fire to his cause? After that, as long as he takes down Hatake Tsukumo, and then uses Kazuki as a springboard, the entire Uchiha clan will become a source of power to support him. In all of Konoha, who could compete with him, Shimura Danzo, for the position of the fourth Hokage? This is really weird, Kazuki brat. Senju Tobirama couldn't hold it anymore. First the monkey's son asks you to be his partner, then the monkey himself asks you to switch teams, and now Danzo comes to ask you to be his disciple? Did you cast a genjutsu on me to show me these absurd scenes and torture me? Kazuki ignored Tobirama and looked at Shimura Danzo, who was waiting for his response, with a trace of pity in his eyes. It must be said that, due to the turbulence caused by the butterfly named Kazuki, The treatment and sincerity that Shimura Danzo offered this time were unexpectedly good. If it weren't for the matter between Sarutobi Hiruzen and Asuma, Kazuki might really consider agreeing to Shimura Danzo and playing with him slowly in the route. It's a pity. Shimura Danzo was one step late again. This time, it was not Hiruzen who stepped forward, but his son Asuma, who surpassed him by one step. With the conditions he offered, even if Kazuki thought there was something fishy, Shimura Danzo didn't think Kazuki would refuse. After all, it was a chance to become the disciple of the Hokage's assistant. This was the ticket to the top of Konoha, and the Uchiha clan knew the value of it best. Not just the Uchiha clan, but many shinobi clans of Konoha would do anything, even lurk in the shadows and plot anything to get it, but not all of them succeeded. Shimura Danzo's performance really surprised Kazuki. He thought that with Shimura Danzo's level of trust, he would probably talk nonsense when he found him, and then commanded him to join the route, but he didn't expect that he really showed his sincerity. However, compared to Hiruzen, Danzo's priority was always one step behind. Both Tobirama and Kazuki think so about this. Assistant Danzo, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in becoming your disciple. Kazuki smiled apologetically. As for joining the route, it's even more so. Shimura Danzo's expression suddenly became ferocious. He was rejected by Kazuki after trying hard to recruit him. He felt extremely humiliated. Detecting that Shimura Danzo has generated a strong feeling of anger towards the host. The target has been linked. Kazuki chuckled. Why is this guy so anxious? He had just politely declined. Why get so upset? Uchiha Kazuki, I am not asking for your opinion but conveying the order and the will of the village. Shimura Danzo said gloomily, I am the assistant of the Hokage. What I say to you is the order that the Konoha shinobi must execute. Come back to the route with me now. Do you want to resist the order of the village and become a traitor of Konoha? Kazuki looked at Shimura Danzo speechlessly. Isn't this style of behavior too domineering? Do you really think you are the domineering president of Konoha? You are just a glove. There are people above you. Not only someone above him in the village, but inside Kazuki there was also someone Danzo couldn't stand up to, watching him intently. Tobirama, is this the student you taught? No wonder you got a 0 for the will of fire. Sarutobi Hiruzen wants to criticize you. Look at Shimura Danzo from the inside out. Where is the shadow of the will of fire? I heard that Shimura Danzo takes you as his goal and idol and imitates your style of doing things. Today, it seems that the rumors are probably true. Senju Tobirama put on a painful mask in the midst of Kazuki's questioning. He knew that Danzo had admired him since he was little, trying to imitate his way of speaking and acting in everything. He had even inherited his attitude towards the Uchiha clan, considering it a pride. No, I never treated the Uchiha clan this way. What the hell has this boy learned? Senju Tobirama was stunned. As the Hokage's assistant, he went to abduct a ninja school student in the middle of the night, and he had to use the big hat of the village's high-level order. What kind of political genius is this? Especially looking at Shimura Danzo's skilled appearance, it is not the first time he has done this. This is because he encountered Kazuki. But if he had been another ordinary genius from the ninja school, no matter how talented and intelligent he was, how could he resist the intimidation of a Hokage assistant? What happened to those children who were kidnapped by the root? Danzo, what are you doing? What else did you do? Tobirama's mind wandered, having no energy to respond to Kazuki's taunts, feeling a suffocating pressure on his chest. Just as Kazuki had pointed out, from any angle, Danzo's actions were completely disconnected from the will of fire. He looks like a jerk who uses his power and status to oppress and bully others. Assistant Danzo, I will not become a traitor. Kazuki shook his head. Danzo smirked, gesturing for Kazuki to follow, but Kazuki continued in a mocking tone. I haven't even graduated yet, I'm not a ninja yet, how could I become a missing nin? I suggest you let me check your brain first. Don't you feel like something is wrong? You brat. Danzo's face darkened, and with a wave of his hand he ordered, capture Uchiha Kazuki. In an instant, from every corner of the street, lampposts and rooftops, masked shadows emerged. Immediately, a dark gray barrier rose, merging with the night and sealing off the surrounding area. Kazuki clapped his hands slowly. Too awesome, really awesome. Assistant Danzo, you not only personally found a student from the ninja school, but also brought a team from the root. The resources of Konoha can be squandered by you like this. The future of the village is really worrying. Shimura Danzo's face became more and more gloomy. He had already thought about it. After Kazuki was captured by him and brought back to the root, he must severely deal with this slick kid. The root members unsheathed their swords, surrounding Kazuki on all sides, their gazes cold and emotionless behind their masks. "Tobirama, you said it, didn't you?" Kazuki did not rush to confront the root attackers. Instead, he continued talking to Tobirama. "For Konoha, you are willing to lend me your power. Now, I'm being unfairly attacked by your student. Don't you think you should do something about it?" Tobirama snorted coldly, adopting a strong stance although with some hesitation in his voice. "If I could punish Danzo personally, I would have done it long ago. I am sealed in your body. Even if I want to help, I can't do anything. You promised not to betray my trust, and I will not fail you. First, eliminate these members at the root. If Danzo attacks you directly later, I will teach you how to deal with it." Kazuki chuckled. "Then wait a while. Don't resist me borrowing your power. This requires you to cooperate with me very much. I want to experience how far the second Hokage's power can go." Senju Tobirama was stunned. He didn't understand what Kazuki meant, but he nodded. At the same time, after hearing Danzo's order, the root members quickly launched themselves towards Kazuki, aiming their swords at his vital points. If it weren't in the village, they would need a certain degree of concealment, otherwise these ruthless machines of the root would have started using powerful ninjutsu long ago. Kazuki ignored the approaching root attackers and instead kept his gaze fixed on Danzo, who was coldly watching him from a distance. Then, he slowly clasped his hands together. Kazuki's secret technique, the power of Tobirama. Kazuki's chakra was rioting. At the same time, Senju Tobirama, who could not feel his own chakra before, seemed to have unlocked some kind of seal, and a power comparable to his peak state surged from the depths of his soul. However, this unleashed power was transmitted in a precise and direct manner, only flowing from Tobirama to Kazuki. Senju Tobirama widened his eyes in shock. Although he still kept transmitting chakra to Kazuki, he had already begun to analyze this state rapidly in his mind, constantly trying to better control this power. "Is this your power, Tobirama?" Kazuki closed his eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry. To protect a better Konoha, please lend it to me." At that instant, the blade of a root shinobi was getting dangerously close to Kazuki's vital points. Kazuki slowly opened his eyes, and his gaze became incredibly sharp. At that time, he was not just Kazuki, he was also Tobirama, UCHIHA Tobirama, and Senju Kazuki. Kazuki folded his arms, and the dark blue chakra that seemed to be materialized burst out from his body. The devastating power tore the earth apart, and the root shinobi attacking him were literally torn to pieces. Chakra-enhanced strength Senju style. Chakra pressure. So these are the root shinobi? Truly, they are monstrously strong to be able to survive my chakra blast. Kazuki sighed sincerely. He was no longer just a student of the ninja school. He was now a shinobi who harbored the power of Senju Tobirama at his peak. In front of him, the root elites, who were still enduring the pressure of his chakra, continued to charge fearlessly towards Kazuki. Although their eyes were filled with astonishment, they continued to advance, unafraid of death, because Danzo had not given them the order to retreat. As ruthless weapons, they have abandoned their feelings and are just cold tools. Poor souls. May the will of fire protect them. Kazuki said so, but his movements were as fast as lightning. With strength and speed beyond the ordinary, Kazuki delivered a devastating punch to a root shinobi in front of him and with a kick, knocked down another who attacked from behind. His movements were precise, effective, and at the same time, contained a certain simple elegance. Within seconds, a small elite root unit had been completely incapacitated. At this moment, Shimura Danzo's eyes were wide open, and his eyeballs seemed to be bulging out. When Kazuki unleashed his chakra, Danzo couldn't believe what he perceived. That was the chakra he was very familiar with. His mentor, the goal of his life, the chakra of Senju Tobirama. After being shocked, Shimura Danzo blinked hard, his expression completely twisted at this moment. "How dare you, you evil Uchiha brat? How dare you imitate the technique of Sensei Tobirama? Are you challenging my patience and bottom line? You are blaspheming." Danzo was beside himself with rage, and quickly began performing hand seals, using ninjutsu right in the center of the village. He took a deep breath and exhaled a powerful blast of high-pressure air. The wind spun violently, expanding from a line to form a wide front, attacking Kazuki with force. Wind release, vacuum great sphere. Kazuki narrowed his eyes. This move was considered Shimura Danzo's unique skill. If Kazuki didn't have Tobirama's power, facing a Danzo at his peak would be a difficult task. But the problem is, Kazuki is not fighting alone. Water release, water formation wall. A vast stream of water erupted out of nowhere, and Kazuki, standing within the dense water barrier, calmly watched Danzo. The vacuum great sphere impacted against the water formation wall, causing only slight ripples, failing to penetrate the aquatic defense. Watching Kazuki's water release, which was identical in every detail to the one in his deepest memories, Danzo was stunned, almost seeing Tobirama standing there instead of Kazuki. From the target Shimura Danzo, you get wind release, vacuum sphere wind release, vacuum wave wind release, vacuum blade. Don't dare to imitate more. Tobirama. Sensei. Danzo growled, rage almost spilling from his eyes, each word spoken with restrained fury. From his perspective, Kazuki's water release, as well as the chakra pressure, although he didn't know how he achieved it, were ultimately a mockery of him, Tobirama's most beloved disciple. This is intolerable. What is unbearable? With a cold, deadly gaze, Danzo lunged at Kazuki, emitting a sharp blade of wind chakra from his mouth in a fluid motion. Wind release, vacuum blade. You pretentious kid, I learned the essence of my taijutsu from my sensei. Shimura Danzo stared at Kazuki's movements closely. A cruel smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and the vacuum blade slashed towards Kazuki's neck. Ah! Senju Tobirama sighed, his heart full of fatigue. He could clearly see that Danzo was determined to end Kazuki's life with that attack. That was going too far. So Senju Tobirama silently increased the intensity of the transmitted power and gradually reached full power. Kazuki chuckled. Was this old man worried that I might die? He is really a sharp-tongued person with a soft heart. At that instant, Senju Tobirama, at his peak, once again descended into the shinobi world, though this time he did so in the guise of an Uchiha. With a single movement, Danzo was knocked to the ground, holding his stomach in disbelief. How is it possible? Kazuki turned sideways, glanced at Shimura Danzo who was kneeling on the ground, and said softly, "Assistant Danzo, you really disappoint me." In Shimura Danzo's eyes, a shadow of Senju Tobirama seemed to appear around Kazuki, looking at him sternly with the same attitude as Kazuki. And on the other side of the shinobi world, Uchiha Madara couldn't hold back after watching this scene. "I will never accept it, Senju Tobirama, you damn bastard." Uchiha Madara's mentality collapsed. He thought he would witness something great, an epic battle of reincarnation between the enemy's disciple and his own brother, a moment of glory for the Uchiha clan. He was eager to see his reincarnated younger brother rise in victory, giving him the satisfaction he so desired. But the reality was quite the opposite. His reincarnated younger brother was displaying the techniques of his former mortal enemy. Madara put on his mask of pain, remembering the reports Black Zetsu had given him, working overtime to obtain information on Kazuki. Since he turned his attention to Kazuki, Black Zetsu entered the state of a busy worker. Uchiha Madara, the unscrupulous boss, assigned him tasks from time to time and forced him to work overtime, regardless of the fact that Black Zetsu was already very busy in order to win the heart of Uchiha Obito. Madara's attitude towards Black Zetsu was clear: as long as it doesn't kill you from exhaustion, keep working to the limit. But the effect is also significant. Uchiha Madara has a thorough grasp of Kazuki's life experience, hobbies, and other information. Why is Kazuki the descendant of Uchiha Kagami? Madara's thoughts were flying a mile a minute, quickly linking together information about Kazuki's origin and finding the answer to the riddle. But now that he thinks about it, it seems that the problem is bigger than he initially thought. Not only did Kazuki learn the Senju clan's chakra-enhanced strength, but also the water release style and chakra feel are quickly approaching that of Senju Tobirama, even including the stance and tone. If it weren't for the fact that Madara knew that Kazuki had mastered Azuna's unique fire release and kenjutsu techniques, which confirmed that he was the reincarnation of his brother, Uchiha Madara would have doubted whether the bastard Senju Tobirama was reincarnated into the Uchiha clan. Actually, if one only compares personality, Izuna and Tobirama weren't that different. It's just that Uchiha Madara has a deep filter, and he is unwilling to admit it from the bottom of his heart. Calm down, I need to calm down. Uchiha Madara took a long breath and analyzed calmly. Kazuki's grandfather is the apprentice of Senju Tobirama. Although this bastard is insidious and cunning, and is an extremely disgusting ninja, he still treats Uchiha Kagami with care. Therefore, Kagami surely left Kazuki a wealth of knowledge that Tobirama had passed on to him. Kazuki's water release and genjutsu probably came from there. Madara's thoughts scattered as he recalled the Sengoku period decades ago. Back in the day, Madara and his brother Izuna would often gather in a room to discuss their opponents. Madara would teach Izuna how to deal with Hashirama, and Izuna would consult Madara on how to deal with Tobirama. At that time, Senju Tobirama's water release and tricks were all figured out by Uchiha Izuna. As intricate as the water release was, for someone with a Mangekyo Sharingan and Izuna's talent, it was not difficult to learn. However, due to a matter of pride, Izuna never used Tobirama's water release in front of him. Even so, the results are remarkable. Uchiha Izuna has been suppressing Senju Tobirama since then. Until Senju Tobirama developed the Flying Thunder God technique, Uchiha Izuna did not have the opportunity to study his new moves. These ninjutsu are not the problem. The key is, the image of Kazuki at the moment of his chakra explosion surfaced in Madara's mind. That posture, that gaze. Even he couldn't deny that there was something about him that reminded him of Tobirama. The real problem is that Kagami must have passed on Tobirama's ideology to Kazuki. For a shinobi, it is ideology that determines his nindo. But Kazuki's background has conditioned him. He has been watching the rubbish written and spread by Senju Tobirama since he was a child. Uchiha Madara felt more and more distressed. It was not easy for Izuna's chakra to be reincarnated, and he found it. Everything started so perfectly, but problems also followed. From Madara's perspective, Kazuki, along with the reincarnation of Izuna, carried with him the legacy of being a descendant of Kagami, Tobirama's disciple, which was a problem. In Madara's eyes, if Kazuki, as the reincarnation of Izuna, continues to develop in the path of Senju Tobirama and his thinking changes, that is simply unbearable and unimaginable. Uchiha Madara's eyes went dark. No, absolutely not. Madara began to breathe heavily. If Kazuki were to become like that, he, as an older brother, would have committed an unforgivable sin. A sin that not even the infinite Tsukuyomi could redeem. I have to find a way. I must find a way. Uchiha Madara clenched his fists. At this moment, his hatred for Senju Tobirama reached its peak. He has decided that when the Moon Eye plan succeeds, he will first create a world without Tobirama. Uchiha Madara looked at his wrinkled arms, and he felt more and more anxious to recover his strength. If he wanted to win back Kazuki's heart, Uchiha Madara didn't think that Black Zetsu could do it, only he, the brother, could do it himself. Uchiha Madara couldn't sit still. Although for someone like him who mastered yin-yang release, reversing the aging of his body was not as simple as simply absorbing chakra, and the process would not be pleasant at all, it was a desperate solution to a desperate problem. However, Uchiha Madara has made up his mind to contact Kazuki in person. For that day, Madara needed to be in top form, and he also needed to change his plan. Uchiha Madara cut off the connection with White Zetsu. He couldn't bear to see Kazuki's current appearance again. From the target Uchiha Madara, you have obtained the Uchiha bloodline, Uchiha Madara version. The sound of gold coins exploding sounded. Madara's bloodline is one that blooms late. Since he awakened his Sharingan at the age of 15, it took him only a few years to dominate the shinobi world. On the other hand, Kazuki also got the bloodline enhancement of Uchiha Obito. Obito is known for having great power in his early years, but without any significant advancement later. His peak of power was when he first awakened his Sharingan. Kazuki, who absorbed the blood of both, has reached the level of a gifted monster in the Uchiha bloodline. But talent is not strength after all. Kazuki needs time to develop his full potential. Compared with Uchiha Madara's gold coins. Kazuki's eyes flashed slightly, and he looked at the barrier set up by the root in the distance, thinking to himself, White Zetsu's Mayfly technique is indeed an incredible ninjutsu. If it is not a specific targeted technique, it cannot be stopped at all. In addition to the root squad that attacked him, from the first moment of the ambush, a barrier that blocks chakra perception merged with the darkness of the night. It was undoubtedly the work of another root squad. Danzo had anticipated Kazuki's resistance and had prepared a rather refined capture strategy. And Kazuki took advantage of the situation. Since Shimura Danzo blocked the perception outside the barrier, Kazuki just used it to test Senju Tobirama's ability. Is this old man willing to lend his power to himself in a real crisis? At present, Senju Tobirama is still willing. Moreover, Senju Tobirama did not want Kazuki to be injured. Knowing these 2 points, Kazuki's goal of activating the power of Senju Tobirama has been achieved. Shimura Danzo fell to the ground, his eyes full of fear and anger. With his strength, he can definitely be called a Kage-level strongman in the shinobi world. Kazuki, a boy of 12 years old, can have the strength to knock him down, and he is an Uchiha. How can this be tolerated? He had to find a way to eliminate this problematic kid as soon as possible. For a moment, Shimura Danzo wanted to tear off the clothes on his chest and die with half a street and Kazuki. And as Kazuki's crisis was resolved, Senju Tobirama's power receded like a tide. Tobirama's power had reached its limit. Like Shimura Danzo, Senju Tobirama was also in shock and doubt. He didn't understand why he could provide Kazuki with the power of his soul, and Kazuki's compatibility with him was so good. Chakra, if increased rashly, would not necessarily improve the strength of the shinobi, and it might even cause disorder in the body. Senju Tobirama had planned to teach Kazuki to stabilize his power and save his own life first. But to his surprise, Kazuki used his power too smoothly and perfectly, and even made Senju Tobirama feel that he was at his peak and returned to the shinobi world. Even the posture, eyes and punching movements were exactly the same, and he even knocked Danzo over. While being shocked, Senju Tobirama found that he could take back the power he gave to Kazuki, so he quickly withdrew it. This reassured him. Tobirama still held out hope for Konoha. Although what he had seen so far from Hiruzen and Danzo was somewhat disappointing, Konoha still had pillars like Tsukumo Hatake and the rest of Hiruzen's teammates. Overall, Konoha still has a promising future. Furthermore, his 2 disciples had not made any serious mistakes. Perhaps they had done a good job in important aspects, but with some minor flaws. However, Tobirama believed that if Kazuki, this Uchiha, were to gain unrestricted access to the power of his peak, the situation would become complicated. Tobirama had already decided that he needed to find a time to have a serious conversation with Kazuki about why he could lend him his power. If this matter is not clear, Senju Tobirama does not intend to let Kazuki use the power of the Tobirama again. Senju Tobirama does not want Kazuki to use his power to oppress his students. On the other hand, Shimura Danzo stared at Kazuki closely, and his expression suddenly changed from anger to confusion. In his perception, Kazuki's chakra can be regarded as the level of a jonin, but it is just within the range of a normal genius. It was a far cry from the chakra he had felt when Kazuki had knocked him down. And at such a close distance, Shimura Danzo didn't believe that Kazuki could deceive his perception and hide the chakra. Even his mentor Senju Tobirama couldn't hide that level of chakra well, let alone Kazuki. So why did Kazuki just now burst out with such power? Kazuki caught Danzo's changing expression and smiled to himself as he used medical ninjutsu to stabilize his body. At this moment, when the root shinobi who had deployed the barrier came forward to provide support, the chakra from a Hokage residence had also arrived. Kazuki's face turned extremely pale, and abnormally bright blood began to drip from the corner of his mouth. His steps became unsteady, giving the impression that he had completely exhausted his body. The secret technique my grandfather developed in his later days really shouldn't be used lightly. This feeling like my internal organs have been completely drained. Kazuki talked nonsense and looked at Danzo with anger. Assistant Danzo, why do you discriminate against me so much? You're saying that I defiled the second Hokage-sama's ninjutsu? My grandfather possessed his entire repertoire of water-release ninjutsu, genjutsu, and chakra-enhanced strength techniques. I can't believe that, as the second Hokage-sama's favorite disciple, you don't have access to them. I studied these seriously, what's wrong? Kazuki accused Danzo loudly, and his pale face along with the fury and anguish in his tone made his words seem incredibly realistic. Shimura Danzo slowly stood up, and there was a trace of embarrassment in his eyes. If he thinks about it carefully, there is nothing wrong with what Kazuki said. The only problem was that the power Kazuki unleashed by exhausting his body had exceeded Danzo's expectations, and he had failed to subdue him. Danzo, accustomed to being domineering, had never met a young genius in the village who dared to resist him. Furthermore, Kazuki's water release resembled Senju Tobirama's too much, and combined with the fact that he was an Uchiha, he had instinctively reacted with fury. As Shimura Danzo stood up, Kazuki slowly retreated, his eyes full of vigilance and disappointment. It was as if he was asking, is this the behavior of a Hokage assistant? Shimura Danzo sensed Kazuki's weakness and became confident again. He said in a cold tone, I still say the same thing. Come back to the root with me, and I will explain everything to you. This is just a necessary sacrifice for Konoha. As a ninja, you need to learn to be patient. Shimura Danzo approached Kazuki, and the root shinobi who came to support also surrounded them. Kazuki's expression gradually turned desperate, but inside he couldn't help but laugh. Because in the next moment, Hiruzen finally arrived.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.